Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the June 18th edition of the Downers Grove Village Council meeting. Good to see so many folks here tonight. If you're watching at home, we're glad you're with us there as well. As is our custom, we'll begin our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Rosa, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Barnett.
Here.
Commissioner Jose.
Here.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit.
Here.
Commissioner Gilmartin.
Here.
Commissioner Glover.
Here.
Commissioner Tully.
Here.
Commissioner Davenport.
Here.
Welcome, everyone. If you're in the audience tonight, there are copies of our agenda on the shelves on either side of the room. If you're watching at home, you can find it on our website as well. Item 3 is, are there motions concerning minutes of previous council meetings?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt the June 11, 2024 regular meeting and executive session meeting minutes as presented.
Second.
Any comments or questions from the council? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Item 4, proclamations. We have a couple of proclamations tonight. If this is your first time joining us, these are opportunities, a little bit of mayoral privilege to highlight some things that I think are worth people paying special attention to, or perhaps attending to a little more differently than they have in the past. So we have 2 of them this evening. One is Garden Week. Whereas gardeners work to preserve our country's traditional spirit of independence and initiative through innovation and hard work. And whereas gardening furnishes a challenging and productive activity for our citizens, for those just learning, as well as those having years of experience. Whereas gardening is a universal activity that bridges social, ethnic, cultural, and economic boundaries, and which promotes a healthy lifestyle, helps reduce stress from other areas of our lives, teaches that rewards are often not instant and can come from diligent efforts, and is an activity that can last a lifetime. Whereas gardening has a long and rich heritage in Downers Grove, as demonstrated by the Garden Club of Downers Grove being founded in 1927, when Mrs. M.L. Puffer was elected president and Mrs. H.M. Lyman was elected wildflower and conservation chairwoman. Whereas the objectives of the club remain the same today as they were 97 years ago, namely the advancement of interest in gardening, support of conservation efforts, furthering city beautification, and funding scholarships. Whereas over these years, the Garden Club has planted flowers, bulbs, trees, and bushes at nearly every park and school in the village, as well as the library, the Main Street Cemetery, the Maple Grove Forest Preserve, and the American Legion. Whereas the Garden Club of Downers Grove is a charter member of Garden Clubs of Illinois and the National Garden Clubs. Whereas scholarship awards are given each year to horticulture students at the University of Illinois. Now therefore, I, Robert T. Barnett, Mayor of the Village of Downers Grove, do hereby proclaim the week of June 23rd through 29th, 2024 as National Garden Week in the Village of Downers Grove, and recognize and thank the Garden Club of Downers Grove for their accomplishments and contributions to our community, and encourage all residents to set aside time to recognize the work that gardeners, hobbyists, and professionals alike do to keep Downers Grove beautiful, and seek opportunities to support the Garden Club and to garden wherever we have the chance. Dated this 18th day of June 2024, Downers Grove, Illinois, and we have some members of the Garden Club here to take on this proclamation.
Sure.
Yeah, come on up.
Go ahead. Doug, we have some more.
Come on up.
No. I don't know what I'm doing.
This next proclamation is a new one. This concerns Juneteenth. Whereas despite the Confederate Army losing the Civil War, many Confederate territories refused to inform their slaves of the Emancipation Proclamation and would not voluntarily set enslaved people free. Whereas in early 1865, Major General Gordon Granger was ordered to lead 2,000 Union troops from the 13th Army Corps to Galveston, Texas, where on June 19th, he announced the executive decree reading General Order Number 3, freeing over 250,000 African Americans that remain enslaved after the Emancipation Proclamation ended slavery nearly 2.5 years earlier. Whereas this action marked the true turning of a page in the history of our nation's effort to fulfill our stated value of equality and the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Whereas since 1865, Juneteenth has been recognized as a special day of celebration of freedom and has grown into a day honoring, learning, sharing the history, culture, and achievements of African Americans. Whereas the Village of Downers Grove remains dedicated to serving all our residents, businesses, and guests with dignity and respect, and believes the promises made in the formation of this nation are promises that must be kept by its current stewards. Whereas the Village of Downers Grove believes its role in defending civil rights is its most important and non-negotiable duty. Whereas the community of Downers Grove strives to build and sustain a culture of hope, love, and understanding and respect of our common humanity, and without defense of the truths noted in the Declaration of Independence, Emancipation Proclamation, and General Granger's words, such efforts would be impossible. Now therefore, I, Robert T. Barnett, Mayor of the Village of Downers Grove, recognize June 19th, 2024 as Juneteenth in the Village of Downers Grove, and I call upon the businesses and residents of Downers Grove to take this moment to celebrate the goodness of all people by engaging each other in family and neighborhood gatherings, faith services, and fellowship, to educate ourselves on our nation's history and the role of the African American community herein, and to look for ways of renewing and extending our own commitments to continuing the efforts of so many before us that have moved our nation ever closer to our shared goals of justice and equality for all. Dated this 18th of June, 2024, Downers Grove, Illinois. Please take a minute and focus a little bit of time tomorrow on understanding what this really means. It is not a new thing. Clearly, 1865 is a long time this has been celebrated, but I think it's an important time for everyone to focus a little bit, take your focus off your daily life, look around, understand what this really means as part of our history and where you fit in making tomorrow better for all. So thank you for that. All right. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm standing here not offering anybody a chance to come up to the microphone. We have a few members of our community here as well as our broader community in DuPage County here, and I want to welcome them up to say a few words.
Thank you.
Guys got me all sidetracked with that crazy nonsense.
Thank you for having us, especially on behalf of the NAACP. We have always stood for civil rights, women's rights, all rights, voting rights. We will be in the fight for rights, no matter what the issue is. If you're on the right side, we will be there to support you. It's an honor to be here, and the fact that you've taken the time out of your day and out of your meeting to recognize Juneteenth is really an honor to me, and I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you.
Michael, stick around for a second.
By the way, this is Michael Childress, who is the president of DuPage County NAACP. Did you? He is also the first black elected to the DuPage County Board in the 84 years of its existence. 184? Oh, I missed 100. I am Margaret Childress. I am the secretary of the branch as well as the Communications, Press, and Publicity Chair, and also the Illinois State Membership Chair. So if you don't mind, we'd like to take a picture if we can. Do you have something we can accept?
Absolutely, we sure will. That's why I told him not to run away.
Okay, all right.
Want to hang on one second, Paul?
Okay,
All right,
I
let's
can
do that.
introduce Paul too. Okay, all right. Paul is also a life member of the NAACP.
And a year member resident, property owner in Downers Grove.
Okay, all right.
And
Something I didn't know. I neglected to mention Warner, who is our community Come on, I ought to know this. No. It's not relations, but it's more or less. Our community relations chair.
For the NAACP, and he's one of our most active members too.
Okay, we're going to move on to item 5, public comments. We have, looks like some few new faces out there, so if you'll bear with me, I'm just going to kind of tell everybody the ground rules. There are several opportunities for public comment during this meeting. The first, titled Public Comments, which we're just about to, is for items not on tonight's agenda. There will be additional opportunities for public comments on items listed on the agenda. Please remember, council meetings are not open debates. While we seldom, if ever, cut people off, we do expect that people will respect the time limit and allow everyone who's here this evening the opportunity to speak. If you plan to speak, please keep the following in mind when you come to the podium. State your name for the record, address your comments to me as chair of the meeting, keep comments to 5 minutes or less, avoid repeating what others have already said. It's okay to agree with a previous speaker. Please keep your comments to 1 visit to the podium per subject, and remember that your comments are most effective when they focus on the subjects within the scope of Downers Grove Village governance. So with that, item 5 on the agenda, public comments. This is for items not on tonight's agenda. If you've got something, come on down.
Hi, my name is Claire Greco. I'm a business owner here in Downers Grove. I've been here for 38 years. I want to talk about the parking and the possibility of losing the parking for making our sidewalks wider to accommodate outdoor dining. I brought up last time that the liquor license is for on-premise only, and I wanted to know how we were going to protect the taxpayers if anyone was overserved or got into an accident and they decided they wanted to sue not only the restaurant but the building property owner, and then of course come down to the deep pockets, which would be us. I also wanted to tell you that there is Illinois bathroom law, and that now we have additional seating for these restaurants. We're not in compliance with the amount of stalls. I reached out to the village, and one of the gentlemen that issues the permit told me that it's called Code 77,890,810. How are we going to circumvent not having sufficient bathrooms for the additional parking, and how do these particular businesses get away with not having the amount of parking? You also passed a law or an ordinance in March 1st of 2022. There were some restaurants that are not in downtown that wanted to do outdoor dining. One in particular was Goldfinger, which is off of Rogers. And because of the size of the building, they needed to have at least 61 parking spots for their employees and their customers. And they had 61 spots, they needed 48, so they could only use 13 spots for their outdoor dining. They weren't the only one. You have Honey and Jam, you have Carnivores and Queen, you have Baked Apple, Grand Dukes. if you're making these other businesses provide parking, especially Goldfinger, for their customers, their employees, and they have street parking, where is the parking that you're making all the restaurants that we have in town? Where are the spaces going to be when you're talking about permanently, not just in the summer, which everyone can get by with, but permanently getting rid of the majority of parking on Main Street, possibly, according to the meeting that I attended for business owners between Burlington and Maple, and parking on Curtis. Why are you, I would say, being selective enforcing rules and regulations for different restaurants and not the others? Also, I brought up parking on the first floor for residents. We have an ordinance here that between 2 and 6 o'clock in the morning, residents can't be parked on the street. So we let them park in the parking garage on the first floor. Again, don't understand it, because if they were allowed to park on the street, their cars would be subjected to rain, hail, snow, and the heat. And you let them park on the first floor where we don't have as many parking spots as we do on the top floor. We have over 144 parking spots, the top floor and the ramp. On the first floor, we accommodate a lot of handicap parking, motorcycles, and the bicycle rack, which doesn't really get used at all, but so I FOIA'd some information. Just as I suspected that the new apartment Dash and some other buildings, they charge $135 a month for parking. We have people that are living in these apartments that are supposedly provide parking, and we let them park on the first floor of the parking garage, and it only costs them less than $800 a year. So we either are going to have to up the prices we pay or move them to the top floor, and then they will go and rent the spot because they don't want their cars subjected to that weather. We also have somebody's mailing address, I can't find it right now, that's why I hate reading from these things, but anyway, it's a business that's in town that has quite a few cars, and they're parking their vehicles on the first floor of the parking garage. And they were issued a parking permit. I looked up the address, and on the commercial property, this particular business is right here in town. And so they're parking their car there, which again, I don't think is fair. It's taking up parking spots for everyone else. We also have multiple units in the Cadence building. I don't know exactly what the name of that one is. We have multiple units there that have parking passes, and they're one bedrooms, 900, 700 square feet. They are provided parking spots. So maybe the 1.2 parking that we're issuing when these 5 different apartments all are one bedrooms that are less than 1,000 square feet are having multiple cars, maybe the number that we're saying, oh, this is what they have to do, needs to be raised if these people do not have parking. We also have the one parking pass.
Are you close to the end of the list?
Yes, this is the last one.
All right.
That is in the Capri building. And if you go on Zillow, which Danny, you might be able to find this, they just sold a parking spot, and they didn't say that you had to live in this building. It was on Zillow. They asked $25,000 for it. They have to pay property tax, which is around $300, $56 a month for HOA, and they sold it for $23,000. I don't know, because it hasn't been registered yet, who purchased it, if that person lives in there, but I think we either have to up the prices, I definitely think we need to move it up there, and I think we need to really consider getting additional parking if we're going to take any more spaces away from the downtown business. Thank you.
Anyone else with subjects not on tonight's agenda?
Good evening. Scott Richards. I'd like to get a clarification on a couple things. I've been trying to attend as many meetings as I can, especially with the, as far as the projected plans for Fairview downtown. And of course, all I ever hear up to this point was always, oh, it's just down the line, it's over a 20-year period. Well, recently, it seems like a few things, especially the downtown, the core, seems to be picking up momentum. As far as, and I'm thinking, okay, what's going on? Who's hit the accelerator? And is there a projected date for a vote on this at all? Or is it coming up this year or in 2 months, next week? I've been doing my best because I'm spreading the word around because, frankly, this decision, I don't think, with all respect to all of you folks, I don't think 7 people should make that big a decision about our downtown. Trying to turn it into a food court, basically, is what it sounds like it's going to be, eliminating the parking, majority of the parking downtown. It's ridiculous. What in the hell are you folks thinking about? Everyone I've talked to so far, they don't have a clue what I'm talking about. Never heard of it. What's going on? Well, I'm going to make damn certain these folks do know before we vote on anything like this. In fairness to our town, the majority, it's going to affect most of the people in our town if this is what you go through with. And not without a fight, because I'm talking to people already. There's people already starting to organize. Because are you serious to take the parking out of downtown, our one main core through downtown? And what happens to the small businesses that are downtown? We just kiss them off? It's not fair, and I don't think 7 people should make a decision that big that's going to have an impact like this on the whole town. So what I want to know is, because I don't want to see this vote coming up sometime when none of us are aware of it, I'd like to know well in advance if it's coming up soon. We need to know. We have a right to know. And we've got people already organizing because it's not going to be without a fight. Thank you.
Others? Items not on tonight's agenda. Okay, before we go on, I don't even know how to do this exactly, so I'm just going to start in. Bear with me. It might seem a little bit off the cuff. I've got some notes that I gave myself really for a later discussion this evening yet, but I think they're appropriate here. Let's start with this. Nobody's voting on taking the parking away from downtown. Let's just start right there. Anybody that comes to the podium and says they, which of course is all the people in this room and the thousands who have participated in the process, are going to eliminate all the parking downtown and it's coming to a vote, is doing their community a big disservice. It's that simple. Let's go back up to what's going on. Guiding DG is a update of our comprehensive plan. This is the 3rd such update since I think 2011. So we're on about a 6 or 7 year pace. And what we do each time is we look at previous plans and we say, how'd that work? And then we ask the public, what do you guys think? And then we talk about a lot of ideas, a lot of them. I've also heard a lot of this, nobody knows what's going on. Let's put some metrics to that. Last 3 village newsletters, which show up in 24,000 households and businesses, 24,000 each time, the last 3 of those. Hard copy in everybody's mailbox, has talked about this process and encouraged people to get involved, given updates, and told them how to get involved. Weekly emails. We send out weekly emails. A huge portion of the community participates in that program. It's a voluntary thing, but 13,000 emails have been opened up by residents and businesses in Downers Grove since March. 13,000. We've done 25 social media posts on Facebook, X, and Nextdoor since March. We're averaging 7,500 contacts with each one of those. 7,500 each time, 25 times since March. Not counting last weekend stops at McCullum Park and Prentice Creek, nearly 500 individuals have participated live in 6 different public outreach events. We've gotten 1,000 survey responses. Not counting tonight, when we're about to talk some more about this a little later, Guiding DG has been part of 11 village public meetings. I can't, you can't, none of us can, make sure that every one of the 50,200 people that lives in Downers is in touch, on the same page, and understands everything. But there's no secret agenda to remove all the parking downtown. Let me tell you a couple of other things I've had people call me and email me nearly in tears about. They are going to get rid of all the downtown parking. That's just not what's been discussed. They are going to tear down Pepperidge Farm. Never talked about it. Pepperidge Farm is a welcome member of this community. Have there been conversations that say, what might that look like in 30 years if Pepperidge Farm decides to leave? You bet. Talking about long-range visioning as a community. They are going to use eminent domain to take houses and put up subsidized apartments. Not been uttered by a single person involved in this process. Here's the best one, they are going to reroute the train. Think that through a minute. It's funny in its absurdity, but here's the thing, guys. In order for this process to really work, we need people to participate. And participate doesn't mean, I heard my friend say he thinks maybe, and then organizing a crew to run down the road with that idea. It just doesn't. That's not how you participate. It's not how you help your community. And it's not what we've done 3 previous times when we've been going through this process. So I'm hoping that people will just stop that stuff, continue to come to meetings, listen to what's said. If you got questions about it, ask questions. But the idea of, when are you going to vote on this? Which this? You know what we're going to do tonight? We're going to start the review of a 4-month process that developed a picture of the existing conditions on a variety of subjects throughout the community. That's the stage we're at. That sound like we're knocking down Pepperidge Farm, rerouting the train, and taking all the parking downtown? It's not okay to do that and to be working against your community in that way. And frankly, that's exactly what it is. So please keep paying attention. Please keep participating. Don't run off down the road with your torch every time you hear some comment about what somebody thinks they heard somebody say. Ask. Just ask. That's what we really need. And then tell us what you think. We do want that too. All right, I'm sorry. That was a little bit of a sidetrack. I was kind of saving that for later, but it seemed like an appropriate time. Item 6, consent agenda. Is there a motion on the consent agenda?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Item 7 is our first reading. This is the portion of the meeting where we discuss subjects on which we do not plan to take final action tonight. These are subjects talked about either the first time tonight or in some cases second, third, and fourth time. But again, these are subjects on which we do not plan to take final action this evening. Dave?
There are 3 items on tonight's first reading agenda, but they all have to do with the same property at 2424 Ogden. Here to provide the background information on this petition is our Community Development Director, Stan Popovich.
Thank you, Manager Fielman. Good evening, Mayor and council members. As Manager Fielman noted, there's 3 items tonight. See if this guy's on. It's not working. Could you hit the next slide for me?
Certainly.
Thank you. It's a planned unit development proposal, a zoning map amendment to create a PUD, a B3 to a B3/PUD, and a special use at 2424 Ogden Avenue. Next slide here, the property is at the hit the next button because I have some animations that don't work very well if the clicker's not working. But at 2424 Ogden Avenue, it's on the west side of town at Ogden and Cross here at the northeast corner. It'll be outlined here as soon as we hit the button again.
I'm hitting the button, Stan.
Okay, we'll just say it's at the northeast corner because there it is right there.
There we go.
All right, very good. Thank you so much to our technical team for doing that for me. The next slide shows what was approved in 2022. It was a special use for an automobile dealership. It included a few service bays on the north side of the building. It included entry and exits, one from Cross Street and one from Ogden Avenue. The next slide will show what is proposed to be a new building, which will house a service facility here. The entrances to Ogden and Cross do not change. The only thing that changed would be a second building located here and then some parking lot changes as well to that location. There's a connection between the 2 buildings for workers to go back and forth between the 2 buildings. Thank you, Doug. We can see that the building here, the front elevation on the top and then the rear elevation on the bottom show the materials are similar to what is currently being constructed out on site and what that sort of would look like from the entry point there on the top slide. The comprehensive plan notes that this property is a corridor commercial. We should have auto-related uses. Those uses serve local residents and regional residents. We look to beautify Ogden Avenue. There's going to be some more green space added into the parcels with some rearranged green space based on the layout. And then pedestrian connectivity is remaining through the existing approval that was in 2022. Plan Commission considered their case at the June 3rd Plan Commission meeting and found the standards for the PUD, the rezoning, and the special use were met, and they recommended approval. I'm happy to answer any questions tonight that the mayor and council might have. We also have representatives with Castle here as well to answer any questions. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for your patience and while we're working through the slide issues.
Thanks, Stan, and welcome back.
Thank you.
Any audience comments or questions on this? Council comments, questions. Leslie?
Just clarification, I know the answer because we talked about it in our Monday meetings, but just so for the public, the service building was going to have to be somewhere, correct? And it was just that with new ownership, they decided to keep it on property so that it would be, close.
That is correct, so it's for convenience for customers.
Exactly,
It's
right. So it's a good convenience for customers. It makes a lot of sense. And then I assume that, so does it decrease the green space at all that was proposed? And if so, I assume all of our stormwater.
It's pretty much a wash.
The wash.
I don't have the exact
That's
numbers
actually pretty impressive.
with me, but all the stormwater is accounted for. It was accounted for before. In the old plan, you can see some islands in the
Yes.
middle there,
Mm-hmm.
and now we just have one more consolidated island in the middle, just based on parking layouts. But the islands around the outside of the perimeter are pretty much the same. So it's pretty much a wash right there. But stormwater will be addressed.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Anyone else? Mike?
Yeah, just to add to that, I mean, the building is essentially going in a place where there was already impervious area, so the addition of the building doesn't create any more impervious space. And I'm thankful for the additional investment along Ogden Avenue, so, very much. Thank you.
Martin?
Thank you, Mayor. Just to confirm, Stan, this second proposal, the 2024 proposal, is not seeking any deviations, variances, or exceptions from village ordinances.
That's correct. It meets all the block requirements.
All right. I will be mercifully brief and not go into my usual recitation, because I strongly believe that if we went back in a time into 2022 and they asked for that building back then, it would have been approved. So I don't have any.
Yeah.
I don't have any issues with supporting it now.
Right.
Thank you, Mayor. I can't speak for everybody else who was up here in 2022, but I can tell you I would have voted for it then. I would just want to thank the Castle Group for their investment in Downers Grove, and I'm looking forward to voting for it next week, well, a couple weeks. Thank you, Mayor.
Anyone else? I'll just add as some dot connecting. If you look at the documents that are available online associated with these agenda items, there are a variety of comments throughout there that talk about compliance with various things such as zoning and comprehensive plans. Those are important because that's the process we were just talking about that we're in, and I don't know exactly when it's going to be finished, but 2 and 3 years from now, you will see councils that sit up here reviewing these kinds of things within sort of the light cast by those various planning documents. It's a very important process that we're in. It's used regularly by staff and councils to make decisions on behalf of the residents, which is why we want everybody's input as we go through this revision process. So please keep that in mind. All right, anything else?
That ends our first reading tonight, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Item 8 is an attorney's report.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Only 3 items to present tonight. The first is an ordinance rezoning certain property located at 2024 Ogden Avenue. An ordinance amending the zoning ordinance to designate the property at 2024 Ogden Avenue as Planned Unit Development Number 69, and an ordinance authorizing a special use to permit a vehicle repair and maintenance business at 2424 Ogden Avenue. All 3 of these items will be on the next active agenda. Thanks, Mayor. That is all I have.
Thank you. Mayor's report. I have a brief report this evening. We have a resolution appointing members to village boards and commissions. Rosa, could you read that?
Yes, Mayor. It is a resolution appointing members to village boards and commissions, whereas pursuant to Section 2.53 of the Downers Grove Municipal Code, the Village Council of the Village of Downers Grove has made the following appointment to village boards and commissions. Now therefore be it resolved that the Village Council of the Village of Downers Grove does hereby confirm the following appointments. Library Board of Trustees, appoint Matt Topic to a 4-year term expiring August 31st of 2028.
We have a motion to accept that resolution.
Mayor, I move to accept the resolution as presented.
Second.
Any comments from council? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passed unanimously. I will add, as part of the mayor's closing report, a thank you to everyone who wrote to us over the last 2 or 3 months as we've worked through this process, everyone that applied and put their name in as willing volunteers to serve their community, and in particular to Mr. Topic, who ended up being the one selected. We really appreciate everybody's involvement in the process. And then a final reminder, if you may or may not have seen, there was a village posting last week, I think it was, reminding everyone that while this particular appointment was filling a vacancy, this generally the standard process is regular terms expire in August. And so we will soon be looking for a variety of board and commission members. So if you're interested, make sure your name is in the hopper before we start that process in July. Council member reports, item 10 on the agenda, an opportunity for council members to report out on goings-on in the community, other groups or activities that they think the community should know about. We'll start with Martin.
Mayor, there's just 2 days left until Rotary Grove Fest. You can already see the setup starting, and very excited about it, because one thing I do want to mention about Rotary Grove Fest, because it has a long tradition and goes back even further, back when it was a Heritage Festival. It was run by the Village of Downers Grove. So if you put those two things together, it has been a tradition and a gathering and a celebration in our community for decades. Often billed as the world's largest block party, because you go to Grove Fest / Heritage Festival in the old days, and you run into everybody you know. You also run into people you don't know, and you meet visitors to our town, people who are new to town, people who have been here for longer than the festival itself. It's one of those opportunities to do what we all talk about here, which is to be welcoming, to get to know people better, to celebrate, to learn more about one another, to mix and mingle with people that maybe are outside of our neighborhood, outside of our community. It really is an opportunity to put a lot of words into action. So if you haven't thought about attending, I'm not going to make any promises about the weather. I did that for 8 years, and I'm not going to pick it up again. I'll leave that to Commissioner Davenport this time. He can pick up the torch. But it's really it really is a great local neighborhood community event that provides lots of opportunities for people of all shapes, sizes, and variances of every nature. So I hope to see a lot of you there. Speaking of Guiding DG, there will be a Guiding DG booth throughout Grove Festival. So if you haven't had a chance to provide your input through any of the pop-ups or the surveys, you can come on down, listen to some great music, maybe have a tasty corn dog or two, pick up a cold beverage, and you can provide your input. You may even find one or more of members of the Village Council at said booth. While we will not have a Village Council booth per se at Grove Fest this year, members of the Village Council are invited and encouraged, schedules permitting, and some of us will be actually working different booths throughout the festival itself. We'll pop in at the Guiding DG booth. So that also presents an opportunity for you, like Coffee with the Council, which we do every month, to come down and speak in person with some of the members of the Village Council in a more informal setting. So look forward to seeing many of you there. Look forward to seeing many of you there. And let's truly continue our wonderful community celebration. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Martin. Chris.
Yeah, I would just like to add best of luck for a safe Rotary Grove Fest. The volunteers, we appreciate all the hard work that they're going to put in. I also just would like to ask and remind the community, as school is fully out of session, there's a lot more kids on bikes walking around, and especially this weekend, just ask that you take a little extra caution this weekend and beyond. Let those peanuts get to where they're going safely. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you, Mayor. Just before this meeting started, I got a chance to take a look at our new building next door. It's not quite finished yet, but it's almost finished. And it got me thinking about the fact that this is scheduled to be our last meeting in this building. It's, yeah, for me personally, it's been 11 years of council meetings, which is almost 400. It's somewhere in that neighborhood, just short of it. And I know for others on the dais, it's many more than that. But it got me thinking about the time spent here, the decisions made here, and the people that we've met here. And it's the people that I think create a sense of nostalgia, despite the water leaks and the fact that it's kind of warm in here right now, and the technology may not be the greatest. It's the people that we've met here that will give a sense of that nostalgia. And I will look back on a lot of time spent here very fondly. And it's because of the folks that have been on the dais, the incredible people on our staff, and our residents. So I just wanted to say thank you to everybody that I've had a chance to meet here and spend a lot of time with over the last 11 years. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Mike?
I, too, just want to encourage everyone to get out to Grove Fest. I look forward to seeing everyone there. And just a reminder, in addition to all the wonderful things that Commissioner Tully mentioned, it's such an important fundraising event, too, for not only Rotary, but so many groups here in town, and scholarships, you name it, tens of thousands of dollars given every year as a result of all of our participation at this event. So please come out, have fun. I guarantee fantastic, perfect weather. That's all, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Danny?
No report. Thank you, Mayor.
Leslie?
Just echoing the thanks for the Juneteenth proclamation, and honestly, one of the best ways to try and combat some of that loss of generational wealth as a result of slavery is to spend money at your favorite black-owned businesses, or buy a book by your favorite black author, go to Patreon or Substack and spend some money there, but really try and inject some money into those who have lost generations of wealth as a result of our history. So thank you for that reminder, and that's all I have.
Thank you.
Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I'm terribly sorry. May I ask for one small point of personal privilege?
You're not going to pick on the weather report.
No.
Then
I
by
was
all
going to
means,
say,
go
I was
ahead.
remiss in two things and didn't pick up on my notes. One was the point that Commissioner Davenport covered, so thank you. And the second was that the other thing that's very special about Heritage Festival and then Grove Fest after it is that it almost always coincides with my wedding anniversary. And I would be remiss if I didn't wish my beautiful wife happy 35th wedding anniversary
good save.
in advance of that date coming. So we'll look forward to it. Always has a special impact and meaning for that reason. So thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the personal privilege.
You might be more than remiss if you blow that.
I was being polite.
Item 11 on our agenda tonight is the manager's report. Dave, we're going to go next door, yes?
Yes, Mayor.
And the manager's report is a continuation of our guiding DG conversations. As I alluded to earlier, there's a fairly large report which we're going to start talking about for the first time this evening. Everyone here is welcome. I think I'm going to say that and probably regret it. We're going to go to the committee room next door. We'll take about 5-7 minutes, get ourselves situated over there. You're all welcome to come on over there, and we'll make it work. We are reconvening the committee room to start reviewing. We received reports that are made available to the public as well, called existing conditions reports. And there's a lot there, a couple hundred pages. And tonight we're going to have that sort of presented to us, and we'll start a conversation.
Just going to add one thing to that great intro, Mayor, before we introduce Josh Kuntz from Halcyon Levine, who will start us off. But there's over 240 pages of meaningful, well-thought information here. The council and the community needs more time than just tonight to go through it. So we're going to start the conversation tonight, and we're going to pick it up again at our next meeting, which is scheduled for July 9th. So we know it's a lot. We want to hear more about it tonight. We'll take it up again on July 9th. We'll get through it in 2 meetings. And with that, I am very pleased to introduce Josh Kuntz, who is a principal at Halcyon Levine, who will lead the presentation. Josh.
Thank you. Thanks again, everyone, for coming out tonight and for having us here. I'm here. Also, Michaela's here with Halcyon Levine, one of the planners assigned to the project, and help with a lot of this report, and then Tim from HDG and Aaron from Baxter and Woodman. So we've got representatives from the full project team that is responsible for these 3 reports that you have. Agenda tonight, I want to give you a brief project update where we're at in the overall project, guiding DG, all projects together. Spend most of the evening on the existing conditions memorandums that David just mentioned with review and discussion. There's a lot of content here. Stan had me cut some slides, so we're going to focus specifically on the key takeaways and then any feedback that you have, understanding that you've only had a short time to sort of digest it so far, but we want to get us talking and see what sort of feedback you might have initially. A quick preview of the visioning workshop series. We just got those scheduled today for the second to last week of July, so I want to show you a little bit of what we're going to be doing as we pivot from baseline of existing conditions into the where do we want to go part of the project. Actually getting into visioning, goal setting, and how we're going to do that, what kind of feedback we're going to be seeking from the community. And then we'll touch on next steps. So project update. First of all, I put together this little graphic, but really I think that our project status update, we've had a successful project so far because we've been meeting regularly with you. We've gotten good staff direction to help us adhere to the project goals that were established as part of the RFP process. We've had excellent outreach and public input so far. I think that's only going to continue, but a lot of that is reflected in these documents. We've gotten a lot of feedback, both online and in person. High quality and timely deliverables, and some of that credit goes back to staff and their review process that we've worked through with them to make sure that these are well vetted before they even get to you. And then, we'll be, especially as we go forward, we'll be starting to filter in best practices and planning knowledge into the process, especially as we get into visioning and goals that comes from all 3 of our firms as well as GZA. So again, outreach across the 4 projects has been spectacular, really. In person, we've had 630 plus points of engagement. Of course, people could come to more than one activity. There could be a key stakeholder who is at the community kickoff, but 630 plus individuals across all these different formats. The community kickoff, which most of you are at, and I think was really an enjoyable event that kicked off the project well. A program of key stakeholder interviews, a variety of staff-led outreach activities, including the school events that Stan and Jason were at, and then the pop-ups, which are still ongoing, but the ice cream truck was out this week, and it sounded like it was a good success. Online, we're at about over 1,700 points of engagement, both on map.social, which is the online mapping tool, and then the online questionnaires. There was a community questionnaire established for all the projects with a slant toward the comprehensive plan. There was a business-specific questionnaire, and then there was a bike and pedestrian-specific questionnaire that were deployed as part of the process. And those are still live, and we're still seeing responses to all of them. And then inside DG mailing, so those are a touch point where you hope that somebody reads that and then goes back and participates in one of these other 2 things that are above. And Doug just gave us the newest issue, so Doug had assumed, but I'd assume that number is probably doubled as of today. So great outreach and participation across the 4 projects, and we're only still in the first. We're just wrapping the first third of the project, so very nice. Deliverables so far, there haven't been significant deliverables up to this point with these existing conditions reports, but project kickoff and community kickoff summaries, all the public summaries that we've done so far have been posted to the project website, so anyone who wants to tune in and see what the key takeaways from all those different events can check that out at guidingdg.com. Also, any public presentations, that would mostly be the presentations that were posted in this room. Those are up on the project website for everybody to check out. And then existing conditions memorandums, we're on schedule for 3 of the 4 projects, and with GZA getting up to speed quickly on the sustainability project. I'd say confidently, I could say that our teams, House Levine, Hitchcock, Baxter and Woodman, and GZA were gelling internally. You know, existing conditions memorandum like this, we're working out some of the kinks, and I think the team is very strong. Jay introduced himself to you all last time we were here. They're on board. They're up to speed in everything that we're doing, and we're looking at their ECM, which might be a little different because it's focused on sustainability, but hopefully in July we'll be out here showing you the 4th volume of existing conditions. And then collaboration with the staff team has been an A+. Even with Stan gone, didn't miss a beat. We worked with staff closely and were able to get some really quality feedback and input that was something that our team could take action on, and ultimately made all these reports significantly stronger. So tonight we are going to review existing conditions for the 3 projects so far. We're going to focus on key takeaways, which is also a way to orient yourself to the report. You know, you could turn to the key takeaways of the chapter first, and then the issues and opportunities kind of juxtapose those key takeaways in different sections. I'll explain that a little bit more in a minute. But really, these existing conditions memorandums, you could also almost think of them as like a book report. Where is Downers Grove today? That's kind of the question we're trying to ask. It's a baseline of existing information. It really sets the stage for what these plans can potentially accomplish. It identifies areas where there may be some conflict between what we heard in community outreach versus what the data shows, you know, census data, hard data versus what people actually want. There might be some conflict between some of those things. They incorporate outreach and public input, the data points that we've received from the community through the surveys and all those other activities. And then they summarize key takeaways, issues, and opportunities. And my last bullet point there, they're a memorandum by design. And what I mean by that is there's still, you know, there's a lot packed into here. There's a lot of design that goes into this document, but we're not at like the, you know, showpiece that is going to be the comprehensive plan, bike and pedestrian plan, streetscapes plan, and sustainability plan. Those are going to be flashier. There's going to be a lot more photos. They're going to look great, and they're going to be something that guides your decision making, and also is a very attractive document that the village can show off. So these are still kind of by design. We're saying, you know, this is our baseline. This is a point in time. What's our understanding of the village today, so that we can get into vision setting, goals, objectives, key recommendations, things like that. Is there any questions about any of that before we actually get into the memorandums?
One question. This is marked as a draft.
Yep.
So I assume there will be updates or revisions to it based on various things, or is this something that we...
Just like David said, we are I guess the homework for you all tonight is, if you haven't read it all, you know, give it it's do a review, get feedback to staff, which will come to us.
Yeah.
I think that tees off something that I did want to say. Usually there's like 3 kinds of comments in a document like this, like factual or you know, a clarification. It just doesn't make sense for Downers Grove, or hopefully there's not too many of those. We've gone through a review, and or a punctuation, a grammatical error, or something like that. And then there's kind of like, this should be in the existing conditions memorandum. You know, maybe there's some additional data points. I think this is pretty comprehensive, but perhaps there's a few things like that. Again, I wouldn't anticipate there being too many, but maybe you all have identified something that should be in that baseline book report. And then lastly, this document's got you thinking, and there's something based on what you've read here that you now know we need to tackle in the comprehensive plan, the bike ped plan, the streetscapes plan, or the environmental sustainability plan. So corrections, fixes, additions to the report, and then jumping off points for the four planning studies themselves.
And then just a follow-up to that, will the data around the number of folks that have filled it out and maybe additional feedback or comments make its way into this, given that the surveys and are still open?
Yeah, that's a good question. So they are still open. We would anticipate doing one more, and we could have updated it one more time closer to today, but the layout and time factor is an issue. We would think that probably once this is ready, I know it's already been public because it's in your packet and everything. But once this is ready to kind of say this is the final set of existing conditions memorandums, we could update those charts one last time.
Yeah.
Say like, when we closed existing conditions, this is how many survey responses we have. And then when we ultimately close the survey, those numbers will still make their way into the comprehensive plan document themselves, or the four documents themselves in support of that. So if we stop the survey and it has 2,000 at existing conditions and we gain another 2,500, ultimately the number in the official adopted plan document is what we would reference. And that is a point.
Let me pull that thread a little further. What do you anticipate as sort of a cutoff point, and what do you anticipate as further efforts between now and that cutoff point in terms of soliciting that input?
Yeah, I think inside DG had the QR code, so that's directing people back to the website. As these pop-ups keep going around, they will be directing people back to the website to take the survey, participate in map.social. Traditionally, the cutoff is around the time we do the visioning workshops, because at that point, we're trying to, even though there's a lot of, we talked about this before, there's a lot of overlap in how people think about issues versus visioning. We're going to hear issues at the visioning workshop for sure. But still, that's kind of like, we're pivoting in the planning process to looking ahead and not focusing anymore on that baseline that we've established.
So
probably end of July.
All right, end of July. So on that front, I don't know, I'm speaking just for me as a once pass on this document, right? But one of the things that kind of caught my attention about that was I'm a little concerned, bad choice of words. If we look at respondents, it seems a little oversampled. And what I mean in particular is, and I fall in this category, so more than half of them, the respondents are over 55.
Right.
And that represents 35% of our population.
Correct.
And then 75% of them were 10-year veterans, so to speak, or longer. And so as whatever might be done, I don't know if anything at this point to try, ice cream truck sounds great at a park, to try and work against that a little bit. But, Downers has picked up 2,000 residents in the last 4 to 8 years. And so that concerned me just a little bit. I don't know if there's anything to do about it, but it's part of why I was asking about timing and cutoffs and what's happening between now and then.
Yeah, I guess anecdotally, I could say that across other projects, I wouldn't say that that's an uncommon thing.
Okay.
Where older residents may be more inclined to, or residents over 55 may be more inclined to take time to take the survey, whereas young parents or high school students are probably less likely to do it. It should be measured against the other forms of outreach, like I forget how many people you guys talked to at the high school, but that was a great turnout.
About 100.
Yeah, so 100 high school students. It is something that I will take back to Marisa and the Altogether team and see if they have any ideas for other ways to push out a QR code or encourage high schools and younger folks to take the survey. I'll ask her about that.
Yep.
Any other?
Yeah, I had the same concern, just, looking at our demographics, the 35 to 54 is kind of the most populous chunk of demographic, but yet we're not really seeing those responses in the survey. So I'd be interested to hear any thoughts on that from them.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, the outreach, or the community survey, the percent of people 0 to 24 years old was 0%.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I understand it's difficult, and maybe it's expected to some extent, but that's not gonna work for me.
Okay.
I'm gonna need more than what we've got here. You know, especially when we're looking at having some key takeaways. We're about to make some very big decisions, and I think the inputs that we get need to be somewhat representative of the population that we have here in town in order for it to really be valid, for us to have confidence in it. So I echo a lot of what the mayor just shared as well.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I will talk to all together about some ideas for how to get them. I have some ideas, but we should talk to them and see what they think. I will say, you know, something important to consider, especially when you look at how the ECMs are assembled. The survey is one sort of ingredient in the comprehensive plan cake, if you will, or all planning studies. So, you know, public input online, public input in person. People who like to do the mapping exercise versus the survey tend, anecdotally, again, that's not a question we can ask in the map, but they tend to skew a little bit younger. And then getting out and getting into the schools, if you can do that. You can't do that in every community, but something like that is another great way to get that participation. But yeah, it's kind of input in person, input online, best practices, knowledge of the community, looking at your past plans, all the different things that are in here all kind of go into a planning study.
Taking questions back, I got one more.
Sure, yeah.
Whether there's any sense from altogether about the level, magnitude of duplicative nature. So you got 1,700 surveys between business and residents, and you got 700 or so live participants.
Yeah.
So, you know, are all 700 live participants, for instance, survey completers, right? Some reaction about that would probably be good for us to just understand.
Yeah, I think that could be tough to measure, but I'll ask them if there's any way we can get a handle for that. Maybe that's something we can ask people at the visioning workshop if they've already taken the survey and leave it open at least through then and then close it right after that would be something we could consider. Okay. So for tonight at least, I'm going to focus on the key takeaways. I'm going to try to touch on most of them, but I also, after we go through the key takeaways and kind of the issues and opportunities, then I think we just want to open it up to questions or observations in the rest of the content of the report. So organization, you'll find kind of the introduction and regional setting, section on community outreach, all the different forms of outreach that we just discussed, past plans and studies, a demographic and market study, land use and development, transportation and mobility, a summary from the streetscapes team, and then community services, parks and recreation. So those are kind of the sections of this report. And we open with a discussion of the overall planning process, specifically in this. So for this memorandum, we're first looking at the comprehensive plan, the planning process for the plan, and regional context for the community. And then at the end of each of these sections, you'll find a summary of the key takeaways, the things that we observed within that section of the document. So for outreach key takeaways, these are specifically focused on things that people stated in outreach. It's a synthesis across the survey, the in-person stuff, the key stakeholder conversations, and these are some of the categories that we started to hear. So, for example, for housing, one of the most common things we heard was concerns about the amount of diverse housing available, desire for more affordable and attainable housing, for everyone from lower income residents to senior citizens and young professionals, and a consideration of options beyond single-family detached housing, a desire for more trails and bike lanes and opportunities to get around without a car. In some of the stakeholder conversations, there was input on complications with understanding the zoning process and how to go through the entitlement process if you're looking to either develop a piece of property or meet building codes. There was a desire for more recreation opportunities, and that there could be additional connections between trails and the recreational opportunities that are in the trails connecting the recreational opportunities that are in the village. Acknowledgement that there are a substantial amount of opportunities for open space and recreational amenities, but a desire for even more green spaces and public gathering spaces. Although the village, maintains a variety of infrastructure and has done a lot of effort to manage stormwater, there's still a perception that infrastructure could be improved in outreach, and there was that was something that comes up, and I would say that that's not inconsistent with Downers Grove and other communities. People tend to think that infrastructure needs attention in their communities. And then for community character, generally people had a very high view of community facilities and services. That was received a high response rate in the survey and in the various discussions that we had with key stakeholders. And people identified an opportunity for the village to continue to build on its established character and telegraph that out to the community a little bit more. Again, these are all based on community perception, things that people weighed in on either in person or online. Demographic and market key takeaways. There has been significant population growth despite a slight dip in 2010. Generally, the village has been trending upwards in population. A significant portion of the population, around 27%, is families with school-aged children, but it also, that segment of the population has been somewhat in decline in Downers Grove. So the senior population is actually the growing population group over the past decade or so. Median household income is high, and it's increased over the past decade plus. Number of residents earning over $150,000 has doubled in that time period. The village has a high percentage of well-educated population with higher education at higher levels, like master's degree and above. There is a mismatch between the types of housing available and the needs of housing, which could widen as family size continues to decline. So you may need more housing for seniors, for example. Median sale price in Downers Grove has generally, over the past decade plus, has risen and has remained higher across the board than DuPage, the rest of DuPage County. And then we did a comparison of median household income to median housing price. And if you compare those two data points, which are, they are comparable, but they do need to be examined in alignment with some of the other cost burden information in the document. But there is a disconnect there. There's median household income. People who are earning that income could be potentially paying more than 30% of their income for housing costs, which is the kind of the typical standard for what you would expect to want to stay under to live comfortably. There is a diversity of jobs. The number of jobs has increased over the past decade plus by almost 5,000, rate of almost 11%. There's 44,600 plus workers who live outside the village who are coming into the village. It's the same stat that Jason Michnick presented the other week that we were here. There's just about 2,356 individuals who both live and work in the village. For transportation, and we worked with Aaron and his team. Oh no, I'm sorry. This is the past plans and studies. It's the overall key takeaway for this section is that none of these studies get thrown out with the bathwater as we do this this new effort. So there's relevant information and input that comes out of each of these studies that we want to make sure is reflected in the comprehensive plan as well as in these additional planning studies that we're doing. For land use and development, one of the things, I think I mentioned it to you all before, one of the things that our team did was a kind of a block by block survey of the community for existing land use. So the existing land use map that's in the report is an updated existing land use layer that House Levine put together based on actual field work. So what is actually on the ground today. Single family housing, this might not come as a surprise, is the most prominent land use type throughout the village. There's some significant commercial centers, including, of course, the downtown. The community is landlocked, which limits your ability to, obviously limits your ability to grow outward, but also makes, puts increased pressure on those specific sites where you may have to do some development. We want to get it right, we need to do it. Transportation and mobility, I'll keep this at a higher level, and if Aaron has to jump in and help me at all, he can, but there's several major multi-lane corridors that sort of crisscross the village, both east-west and north-south. Some major spines that are very high traffic. Highest amount of traffic, the heaviest traveled corridors, Butterfield Road, Ogden Avenue, 63rd Street, 75th Street, are some major corridors that traverse the community. Well served by public transit, 3 metro stations. There was some points on parking. Majority of collectors and local classified thoroughfares do allow for on-street parallel parking, which is good, generally speaking. And then there are some disconnects between the bike routes. Dedicated bike lanes do exist. There are not a significant number, or maybe not any, protected bike lanes or physically separated lanes within the village. For facilities and services, I don't have to dive too deep into this unless we want to, but generally it does appear that most of these either village-operated services or partners like the school system, the education system, parks and rec facilities generally are operating well and seem to be well-serving for the population. And then the issues and opportunities, what we did in this section, and this is sort of the last 2 pages in the report, and it's sort of the crux of the report. So if there's a disconnect, for example, in housing, where the data says that there could be a gap between the types of housing that is in the community, community outreach, on one hand, people have said they want to see more affordable and attainable housing, but then if you go to the survey, most people said that they don't want to see more apartments in the village. So there is a bit of a disconnect between those things when apartments and smaller units tend to be the more affordable housing. So this issues and opportunities section is where we tried to tease out some of those areas where there may be something where the comprehensive plan can provide direction and sort of pick a path between those different key takeaways and the crux of those different things that we heard. So it's probably enough of me talking. I will turn it over to you all if you want to ask any questions specifically about the comprehensive plan, existing conditions memorandum, before we go to Aaron and Tim.
It's a lot there, huh? Thank you. Appreciate that.
Just sit here.
Yeah, go ahead. So I kind of assume, other than Leslie, that not everybody has made it through all 192 pages plus the appendix.
I read it.
You made it through?
I did. I won't tell you the ending.
Send you a summary, co-pilot.
Yeah, great. All right. Well, if everybody's been through it in that level, I have not. I've gone through, just so everybody understands context of where we're coming from, I've been through essentially what was gone through here, and then started to move back into each section, and I'm probably a third of the way through the whole thing. So I guess if anybody's wants to start in, and Leslie, go ahead.
I have so much. But
Hey, let's
I've got it broken up into
yeah,
things.
let's stay on one and get everybody sort of
Yep.
on that, and then keep moving.
Awesome. I'm going to start with housing just because that one kind of started at the very beginning. I obviously noticed the same thing, even just reading through the report, that it's fascinating to see that we have a lack of affordable housing, but yet there's a concern with apartments. And I do wonder if part of that is the fact that all of the apartments that we've been building are $3,000 plus a month for rent, which is not affordable. That's, I don't know, almost double my mortgage. So, granted, I bought in 2012, but I wonder if that's a part of it, right? It's downtown, it's a little bit more congested, and they're high end, right? But one thing that I want to bring up to everyone, and I would be happy to put this as a new business item to see if we want to move forward with it. I've mentioned it before that at the Illinois Municipal League Conference last year, there was a presentation by the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus that they have the Homes for a Changing Region program where they had gotten some funds from HUD, and they can help communities look through what housing they're missing. So for example, I think they've done it for about 30 communities now, and you can go on their website and take a look at it. Woodridge is one of them. They specifically found that they were missing single-story age-in-place for seniors who didn't want to go into, say, an apartment building. So they're going to be working on that in the Seven Bridges area to try and help with that. I think that this is a route we need to go down because there's a clear disconnect between what we want and kind of how we visualize it. And I think that this report might give a little bit more detail and guidance, both for us, but also for residents to kind of see what is missing and what would help get us there. And maybe take away a little bit of the stigma about what that might look like. So I just wanted to put that out there here to have everybody consider that we do this Homes for a Changing Region project with the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus. I think that can help give us a level of detail that we just don't have here. But beyond that, it is fascinating. One of the pieces that wasn't necessarily in the key takeaways that was in there was about how a lot of the homes, and especially the single-family homes that we're building, are 4 to 5 bedroom homes, but that's not actually what our demographics look like. Our demographics are pointing more towards some of the smaller units of, especially with people aging in place, 1 or 2 bedroom units, and that's not really what we're building. So I do think we need to be a lot more mindful about what that looks like. Going back to what he was talking about with some of this, the median selling price is $464,000, which is 13% plus higher than the DuPage average, and that's pretty astronomical. And I think some of that does go back to the size of the homes that are being built, but it's not necessarily lining up with what our population looks like. So I think that having a more detailed report on that would give us a little bit better direction of what we want the village to look like and give us a little bit more data on what that would look like. Especially noting that when you look at the apartments, our renters are about 24.2% of our renters are cost burdened based on the metrics that were given in the report versus maybe only about 22% in DuPage. It is clear that, our housing stock is high. And I think that folks are nervous looking at the apartments that we've built. And I think we need to dig into this a little bit more. This housing existing conditions it really is fascinating. But, in those demographics related to the housing, we're seeing that polarization of more people earning over $150,000, but a lot more are also earning under $25,000. And you're really seeing poverty levels that are the disparities are getting worse based on race as well. Being what we talked about of putting money back into those who lost money from generations of slavery, it is leading to our demographics being a little bit more white than our neighbors. And I think that that's something that we need to consider as well with our housing stock, is we're probably not attracting a very diverse population when our median home prices and also our apartment costs are so high. It's really hard for folks to get in to Downers Grove knowing that there's not a lot of generational wealth there. I am just conjecturing, but based on conversations that I've had with folks who are in the real estate business, and then also just friends who have had neighbors who have moved out, you know, it's obvious that if you're making $115,000 a year, you're not going to be able to buy a $400,000 house without some help. And that help is probably coming from your family. And knowing that we have a lot of families who, again, missed out on generations of wealth, you know, of home ownership and being able to have that, it's a concern for our population that, you know, are we going to keep seeing these large, expensive buildings? And as we have an aging population, what is our village really going to look like? You know, I know we've had a history of having to either close schools or reopen them kind of based on the fluctuations in families being able to afford here. And I would like us to kind of head that off here and not have to do that again. So again, I'm going to make the push again for the MMC report. I think that's really important, but I think that we can't minimize the data, even this, you know, basic existing conditions data that we're seeing here with really the mismatch between income and population and what our housing stock looks like.
Even in that, the median household income just to purchase a $464,000 home or whatever it was, your down payment is $92,000.
Yeah, almost $100,000.
Not a lot of folks have.
Especially knowing that, again, student loan debt is on the rise, so there's just...
So what I'm wondering though, every time we talk housing, we've been talking housing for at least 20 years. What I struggle with is there's not a bunch of houses being unsold. So we're trying to say that we don't want certain people buying here. We want to somehow manage that market because houses in Downers sell. In fact, they sell about as well as anywhere in DuPage County. There is clearly a housing shortage in terms of available units, whether they're rental or owned across the United States. But it's not like there's a bunch of homes being unsold because they're so expensive. We're not missing people moving into our community because the houses are so expensive. We might be missing certain segments of the community from an income standpoint. Absolutely, I'm sure that's true. And I suspect that'll soon become true in, you know, some neighboring communities who are going through the same thing we went through 20 years ago. But I guess I struggle with what that means from a policy standpoint, as we consider policies that govern our future land use and our zoning and our comprehensive plan.
So the two biggest
What
to
does
me,
this tell us?
yeah, would be being more permissive with multifamily residential, because most of our residential is not necessarily zoned that way. So making it a little bit easier for multifamily to enter in, even if that looks like a townhome, a side-by-side, and potentially, you know, looking at our ordinances, and, you know, we've talked about this with regard to sustainability, some incentives for, you know, trying to incorporate some affordable units into some of the things that some of the developments that are happening. So those are the two biggest impacts now that we could have. But again, I don't know exactly what that would look like without getting more data, which again, I would point to, I think we really need to engage MMC and get a report done so that we can really see what it is that we think we're missing based on our population.
I certainly have no problem with additional data from somebody, particularly if it's Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus or CMAP or anybody else. The challenge I have is that we're trying to blend. It's like so many spots in this. It's like the next three, right? The amount of conflict that goes on. And what we're trying to blend here is, you're exactly right. I mean, we're sort of having those conversations around Fairview. But get beyond 1,700 people and ask folks whether they expect or are willing to have somebody put a duplex in next to them. I'm not sure that's all that hot.
Well, can I maybe
Happy to.
maybe I can help reframe this just a little bit. And that, instead of thinking about it as more permissible zoning, rather looking at our existing zoning, and are there places right now that are zoned single-family that have been underdeveloped? They're really not that desirable for the more expensive single-family homes and might be more suitable. It's a busy street, it's a busy corner, it's something. But there may be opportunities there that we can look at in terms of our zoning to make them more suitable to other opportunities that could help address some of this affordability issue.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. To your point a bit ago, I mean, the building that we're seeing, these 4 and 5 bedroom homes, these are folks that are investing in our community, folks that are investing in their homes. I don't think it's unnatural to do that sort of thing, and given some of the other demographic information we're seeing, it's not surprising that we're seeing larger homes going up. Incomes are rising, education levels are rising. And these are all positive things. One thing I'd like to understand is with the decline in families with school-age children and the increasing number of senior citizens, are these things happening in Downers Grove at a faster rate than elsewhere in the country, or is this just attributable to the aging of the baby boom generation?
So, yes, that's a great point. And what occurred to me was, are we really looking at a trend that's going to continue in the future? Or are we looking at something where we're going through a bit of a valley, and some maybe getting some information from our schools in terms of what they're projecting for student populations going forward might be informative to this as well.
Absolutely, because it may be that we're just seeing what's happening with the country at large, but I'd like to understand that a little more deeply than what we've got here.
Our schools,
I just don't want to see us overreact.
Yeah, there is some data in here that just compares to DuPage.
Yeah.
We're aging. We're
aging faster.
We're older. We're an older community.
Yeah.
As it pertains to that.
And aging faster. That change over that period was higher as well.
I know that our schools, though, do like 5-year look-aheads at what they're projecting in terms of student population.
Well, and then they bring 6th grade to Herrick, and I think we have the answer in my mind of what's happening there.
Right.
We should certainly ask, but I think that population is already, with the additions and all that that have been happening, it already feels like we know. But I think it's definitely worth asking as they project.
Yeah, and just real quick, related to that, I kind of see this as a concern, similar to when we talk about our economic development, right? Making sure we have a good mix of things so that if we're struggling in one area, maybe I see housing stock as similar, right? If we're going to have this rapidly aging population and even faster potentially than DuPage County, and our housing stock doesn't support that, and people want to try and age in place, that is going to create some issues for us as well, And so my point is just to maybe we get that more of that data and see that that's actually what could potentially be happening, and we're missing some of that. That might be an important piece to put into the comprehensive plan.
Can I also add that when we talk about the 44% of respondents seeing apartments as a negative impact on our community, my guess is, this is just me guessing, but I wonder what percentage of the survey respondents were apartment dwellers. I'm just saying. This once again goes to kind of the, who's answering the questions, and it affects, the takeaways.
For sure.
Yeah, I would. A couple things. I think I noted that question particularly. It was brought up already that there is apparently a thought that apartments and condominiums will have a negative impact, but townhouses will have a positive impact.
Yeah.
So to me, that feels a little bit of an affluence view. But I also, the question, so forgive me, But when I kind of reread that question, the impact isn't necessarily the same as what you might want. So the impact here of what an apartment, or the perception of what apartments might be, may not be how someone feels about staying in an apartment, but maybe how they think about apartments being in town. Single-family homes having 78% positive impact, yet we are struggling to have the inventory for those who live alone, or seniors, those types of things. So it gets a little bit into maybe nitpicking on the question, and I don't want to, I have a few of those too, but it is that what struck me most curious was the idea that condominiums and apartments had a more negative bent to the responses, as opposed to like a townhouse, which to me is almost the same thing, except it just feels a little fancier to say, I live in a townhouse.
I think there's a thing that
Right.
you guys are both talking about that I see exactly what you're saying. I kind of agree.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I peg it on affluence, though. I think I peg it on, in 2017, we made a bunch of zoning changes because people were so upset with development downtown. And although those zoning changes we thought were appropriate, I don't know if everybody understood what they meant really. And so since then, there's been a couple more new buildings, right?
Yeah.
And there is a conventional wisdom hanging around, leaning on the fence at the soccer game, that all those apartments are ruining our town.
Yeah. Agreed.
And so,
Yeah, I agree.
I don't know that that's an affluence thing as much as it just is a reaction to 15 or 20 years worth of pretty heavy apartment building.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah. Change.
Anyone else?
I just also, I mean, I know this is, we're talking Downers Grove, but things don't end at our borders. And so, I know we've looked at DuPage County as a whole, but I do want to point out as well that, in some of our neighboring communities within, some within a couple miles of here, there are more affordable options available as well. And we don't exist in a bubble here. So I'm not sure what to do with that information, but when we look at analyzing, what the extent of the issue is or the problem is and what the potential solutions should be, I personally just don't see this as just a Downers Grove issue. So I just want to put that out there as well.
I had a data question on that.
Yeah.
I don't have it in front of me, but you gave, in one of those paragraphs, there was a little bit of an explanation of, the 30% target in the average home and then and what a down payment might look like. There was some math. Remember that? There it is.
Yeah.
So, do those numbers include some sort of an estimate of that, what the property taxes on that 464.5 are? In other words, is it worse than that actually? Because it only includes the cost of the home?
The calculator calculates in, I think the current average, the interest rate's 7.45%.
I'm talking about taxes.
I think the calculator accounts for that, but
It'd be good to know that, simply because that, if it didn't, that 466 is way worse. That's one thing, right?
Yeah.
And if it is, we want to understand that it is, and when we make these comparisons to other communities in DuPage County, that's part of the equation.
yeah, we can double check that. I think it does take that into account. We just looked at the, I believe it was a Redfin calculator, a typical mortgage calculator, which I believe those do take into account taxes, but we can double check it.
Chris, you want to say?
Yeah, I just, from a data standpoint, I just wanted to echo you and Commissioner Davenport had mentioned, just the survey, a lot of long-term residents, 54% of those are 55 and over, and we also had a high percentage of retired people who filled out the survey. So I want to just echo my thoughts on how do we diversify that if possible, because look, that population is clearly committed to seeing what's best for Downers Grove.
And thank you for that, right?
Well, I thank you for that. I'm not quite there yet. I'm one of the other ones. But I feel like it's important.
Rub it in, kind of rubbing it in.
Laughter is the best medicine, Devin.
Thank you, Chris.
But I just wanted to make sure, since that point was made, I feel like I want to put my name on that too, like whatever we can do, because as we look at who is growing in town, it does seem to be the younger population. I mean, the older population is growing, but we're also, actually, my point was this, we're also talking about a 30-year vision. I'll leave it at that.
Yep.
It does include taxes.
Does it?
It does, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Good. Any other sort of housing demographic related stuff? Martin?
Not a lot of surprises, actually. Seems like we kind of, I mean, some of this, it's like it's deja vu. It's kind of what we've, when we look at ourselves in the mirror over the years, yeah, there's been some changes here and there, but nothing market, I would say. We've got a little bigger. Demographic in terms of age has changed. The world has changed. I'm also curious about the cyclic versus long-term trend issues, because you don't want to plan for the now, you want to plan for the then. So I'm always concerned about, well, let's make sure everything looks just the way we want right now, and then oops. It's like when you build a house, right? You build a house and 5 years later, okay, and then I got to adjust. So we really want to think long-term.
That's right.
And focus on things like location, layout, and lot location and layout. That's what I was going to say. See, we're supposed to correct me on that. Because those are things you can't easily change. But I'm also struck by some of the same themes. On the one hand, we don't have any of this, but then we have lots of this. I want to have this. I don't want to have that. So we have a lot of the same themes. A lot of it reflects, I think, the continued eclectic diversity within our community that has always been there and continues to be there.
Yes.
And then your comment about, what do you want to be and what are you trying to compare yourself to? Because I know this isn't that you point out quite well, Commissioner, this isn't the study. This is existing conditions report. It's not an affordable housing study. It wasn't intended to be. But what are you comparing yourself to? Because on one hand, if I want to go buy a more expensive house, I go to Oakbrook. If I want to buy a less expensive house, I go somewhere else. And what do you want to be? Who are you? All that kind of factors into it. And the real key to me is, are you a successful, dynamic, healthy, growing community?
Yeah.
Having a good eclectic mix has, I think, always been one of our, both economically and residential, has been one of our hallmarks. I'm always glad to see that one of the things we're going to do is continue to support historic preservation, because that has benefits beyond just housing stock. It has all kinds of other benefits. I do wonder whether some of the negative reaction to apartments and condos is more about reaction to buildings than it is necessarily the units or the cost or anything else. I bet you at least some part of it is that.
Yeah.
Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah.
Recent memory.
Because that's been going on for a while. Some people love it, some people don't. Just like, the outdoor dining. Some people like it, some people don't. It's exactly what I thought I was going to say. So I don't know. I mean, I'm listening, but I'm also struck by how little has changed. So how much has changed and how little has changed all at the same time. But overall, I mean, a really good, it's kind of a Stuart Smalling moment when you look in the mirror for the community.
Chris?
Yeah, since we're still on data, and I think one thing that surprised me, and I just want to make sure I understand this data correctly, there on page 40, there is a chart about the household makeup, and if my math serves me, this is telling us that in 2022, 72% of households in Downers Grove had no children.
That's what I saw too.
Same, yeah.
Okay. So I think I need a little clarity just to make sure that those are perhaps, I actually, I don't want to say obviously, because this one kind of struck me as very, it just surprised me. And
Where's the flip side of that?
but folks maybe that had children, the children have moved out, counts in that. But that only 28% of the households in Downers Grove have children living in their home right now was a surprise to me.
That's why I saw 27.7%.
Yeah, that was where I was kind of getting at with the 4 and 5 bedroom. Wasn't necessarily
So we should-
not appreciating the value that it brings the community, but more of the fact that like we're seeing a decrease in that size, and that is interesting.
Don't forget,
It's a
more
weird
people are going to be using
mismatch.
those bedrooms for offices now.
That's true. That's true. Working from home and.
It'd be a good thing to sort of double check, but I, you know, when Martin said deja vu all over again, there was a time when if you would have just asked me what that number
Yeah.
is, I would have said 60 to 65% of the households in Downers do not have a child
Do
under
not.
18.
27.7% of the population consists of families with school-age children. You know, I meant to do this at the very beginning and I forgot. You know, we dove right in, but 94% of respondents were satisfied or very satisfied with the overall quality of life in the community. And so I just, you know, kind of,
Stuart Smalley.
I mean, yeah, well, I just, you know, as a starting point, you know, I mean, I think it's worth reflecting that most people are really happy. And maybe that's why it makes it easier to kind of find the things that they're not as happy with, right? Because so much of it is so wonderful. The things that aren't as wonderful stand out a little bit more. You know, 82.5% thought the community image and reputation was a strength. So, I mean, doggone it, people like me.
I was waiting for somebody to say it.
That's right. So,
People of a certain age.
and I just, you know, I mean, that's just something to get out there, I think, and to celebrate once again. We can't do enough of it, in my opinion, because so much is really, really wonderful about Downers Grove. So, anyhow, I have nothing more on housing. I got more to say.
I'm sure we've all got lots more to say. Anyone else on the demographic sort of housing front? I mean, this isn't obviously the end of the conversation, but
I mean,
Chris,
I
go
just
ahead.
have a lot of random notes, so
Yeah,
I'm just
no,
trying to
go
go
ahead.
through them. I wasn't sure.
Say-
You know, 43% of households have less than 100,000 in income. Almost half our community. Something I think important to remember.
That's why we keep taxes so low.
I think, you know, again, page 46 is a overlay of the percentage of population in poverty. I just want to also make sure I understand that the area that includes Prairie, well, the titles of Prairie and Warren and Lee there, that orange area in the almost dead center, is the data telling us that 10 to 15% of the people that live in that area are below the poverty line?
Yes.
Okay. I question that. I'd like that verified.
Yeah.
I saw that too.
Okay.
kind of makes you wonder if it's reversed.
Also start thinking about all the various multifamily housing types in and around the downtown that show up in those census tracts. There's a lot of multifamily that might be influencing, it is influencing the number, it might be correct. We kind of did a deeper dive on this at the staff level, asked that same question.
Okay.
So it's great to verify it, but keep that in mind.
Yeah, I was,
A lot of folks on fixed income there.
And that was that
Okay, so there's-
center of town, right?
There's the,
South of the tracks there.
right at Franklin and Warren.
yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
And yet the median household income is increasing.
Just maybe an interesting grouping of area.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
Eclectic.
most expensive.
On page, because we're talking demographics, I'm trying to
What
keep
page
it.
was that again, Chris?
46.
Thank you. On page 53, one of the key takeaways about the family and senior demographics says that though a large proportion, 27.7 of Downers Grove population consists of families with school-age children,
Right.
it is also the fastest declining household group. I didn't see anything that showed that decline, or maybe I missed it. I understand that it's a smaller group compared to the balance, obviously. I mean, but I didn't see the trend of that declining.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because the word fastest there
Right.
imparted.
Sounds like-
Exact.
Yeah, and I appreciate the,
Right.
I appreciate the trend that maybe less people are having children. The fastest declining felt a little dramatic. Urgent, right.
It goes to your observation earlier about we should get more from the schools and the fact that
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
Herrick is now expanding to.
Right.
I mean, I don't need to relive it all, but
Right.
Yeah.
there's a disconnect.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see from schools, because I can tell you that our kindergarten class at Fairmount is dramatically lower than most of the other grades. We've been seeing kind of a drop-off.
and Lester, when my
Yeah.
last just left, was
Huge.
bursting,
Yeah.
so.
Well, you know, and as people age and downsize, they sell their older homes to
Right.
families who come. That's
Yeah.
why I'm interested in knowing what the projections look like
Yeah.
going forward.
Yeah.
Much more so than
Yeah.
I am looking
Yes.
at what has happened. So,
And then the last on the data, the question that I had is on page 89, when it has to do with broadband access.
Oh, I had a question about
Yeah,
that.
The
downtown.
same area
Downtown.
with the same percentage. It was a
Huge
uh,
percent.
10% or more in that area do not have
I think it
broadband
was like
access.
12%, and yeah, I marked that down as well. I mean, it seems wild to me that our
Don't-
heart of downtown
don't
has
those
the least
two-
access.
All right, we're going to verify, but
Yeah.
don't those two
Feel flipped?
look like they're flipped? It just
Could be.
That's,
I mean, again, and there are some multifamily there that
Yeah.
that I would understand would contribute to that, but yeah, I mean, I made a note of that as well in terms of internet. Why is it that the downtown seems to be the least connected?
I can
of
tell you
village?
that our schools too have done an excellent job of providing Wi-Fi access.
They have.
To families who don't have it or can't afford it.
Yeah.
And it was especially important during the pandemic.
Absolutely.
So,
Library too.
Yes. So, you know, it's an issue, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there isn't access, right?
But only if they have kids.
Correct.
Sorry, I found one more. Okay. Page 45, we're looking at the poverty rate chart at the top. I just want to confirm, should those years be flipped? We have 2022 first and 2010 second, and I think typically it would be reversed. I was trying to read in the paragraph, but it wasn't totally clear to me. So just a confirmation on what those trend, if in fact the poverty rate is going up or if it's going down. Because if you looked at just the chart, assuming how it might typically be.
According to the text, it says it's going up in Downers Grove, but down in DuPage County.
Okay.
It said that between 2010 and 2022, the poverty rate in DuPage County fell by 0.3%, but the poverty rate in Downers Grove rose by 1.9%.
Oh,
The paragraph right above the chart.
okay.
Yeah.
Not really 1.9% because really it's points, but that's a topic for another discussion. One of my pet peeves, I think those should be switched anyway. 2010 should be on the left, 22 should be on the right, simply because I think that's the way you read data.
we talked about it earlier, there will even be punctuation comments, right? And so that's
Fair
a
enough.
presentation thing, and it's totally why this is a draft.
Yeah.
And that makes perfect sense.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just important how we're interpreting it.
Yeah, but I think it goes along with the fact that, you know, in
Yeah.
the report it had stated that we're seeing more people who make under 25,000,
Yeah.
so that tracks.
Okay. Although actually, the change in share of populations of household by income those populations are actually decreasing. And what's grown is the 150 or more. So we're seeing less of that population based on this data here. We've lost 1.7% drop in people who make,
You're looking at 44 now?
sorry, page 44, the
Yeah,
one
right,
right up, yeah.
Mm.
So I will reserve my judgment on why I think that drop might be happening, but if the 8.2% doesn't tell you something, I'll leave it at that. Okay. I think that's all I had. Probably not, but I think that's all I had.
Leslie, to kick us off on the next, next subject is, unless anybody's got any more demographic housing stuff for tonight, we're gonna do this, at least once
Yeah.
more, maybe a couple more times, so. Leslie, you wanna continue down your,
I mean, in this one, see, the problem is a lot of this other stuff kind of coincides with the next two plans, so I don't know if it's best
Start
here or then. I mean, the other thing that I had, and which could start then in the bike and pedestrian, is the fact that we have 2.4 miles of bike lanes and 2.6 miles of grid connection paths, which I think confirms what some of the concerns that we have, And again, not to get too far into the bike and ped plan, but you can kind of see that some of the things in that 2013 plan, we implemented almost very few of them.
we did get rid of the abandoned bikes.
We
I
did.
saw that.
I mean, that's annoying.
But I think that kind of punctuated the concerns that folks talked about in some of this comprehensive planning of the fact that it is really hard to get around safely if you're not in a vehicle. And so that was just a big piece that stuck out to me. But we're going to talk more in depth later about that. But that was the data that was in this particular report. I don't know if anybody else had anything to say about that part.
Of course, I have a lot to say about the bike and ped stuff. I think highlighted on page 72, which we just highlighted a lot of the challenges. I think, no question, we have challenges. I am very much looking forward to creative ways to overcome many of these. I was, I'll say, pleased at how much bike and ped was of top of mind for the respondents and the feedback that we received. I think it's a testament to a real opportunity there. 41% of survey respondents identified pedestrian and bicycle trails as a weakness. So there's a lot more specifics. I also feel like I need to drill down. There was a lot of maps and data there. Agreed. We have literally 0.4 miles of dedicated bike lanes, and it's not separated. And so I'll stay off my soapbox, but I think we've got a real opportunity to make some great changes, and I was pleased to see the community seems to be behind that as well. So I'll leave it, I think, at that. Just, again, highlights the challenges. I think we have to address those.
Going to the issues and opportunities, the bigger one. I'm just struck by, I'm not disagreeing with you, Chris, but what I'm struck by is traffic safety, traffic congestion, and pedestrian connections, and trail connectivity, and how much conflict exists there. Right, that's going to be our wrestling match for a while.
Yeah.
It doesn't say anything, right or wrong about the takeaways or people's opinions on it, but there's, in those elements, we have whatever input we have is very much in conflict. It's going to be a challenging thing for us to sort through.
Well, in addition to that, with some of that traffic congestions, I mean, some of those roadways are not ones that we have direct control over as well, so there's kind of that added layer of difficulty knowing that some of these are managed, especially the ones when you look at that the crash data. Most of the worst of the areas are not even roads that are necessarily controlled by us, so we don't have direct control over, the light timing and, some of those other issues, so it's definitely a challenging one.
Yeah, well, first of all, I wanted to just, 1.66 miles of new trail on 75th Street was identified, and I believe just about all that's actually in Woodridge and Darien. Exists on the south side of 75th Street, not on the north side of 75th Street. So just the section between going east of Fairview on the south side would technically be Downers Grove. So it's, that justly should not be included in our purview. The 2013 Bike and Ped Plan, I mean, that was 11 years ago. I'm a little, it needs to be a foundational part. It's a starting point for what we're doing here. But it has less meaning to me than some of the other studies that are more recent. So
I disagree with you, Mike. That was one of the things that I had actually highlighted. There's a comment someplace about it informing. That should inform this. I frankly see that as we ought to be starting with a blank slate of paper and some goals. I don't know how you can look back at that and say council policy decisions in support of that have been lacking in every aspect, right?
And I'm
I don't
not
know how you
saying
can say
that.
that. So I don't know that there's, given all the report that we now have and all the challenges in front of us and the conflicting goals and stuff, I feel like that's borderline just old news. It's not even relevant.
I'm not sure I'm following what you're saying. Because
I don't want to be constrained by that. I guess maybe it's a better way of saying it.
Well, so I'm agreeing. You're agreeing with me.
You're agreeing.
Oh, all right.
Because that's...
I was misunderstanding you.
You misunderstood me, because that's... Okay, good. Because that's exactly what I was saying, is that it's 11 years old, and to me, it just doesn't seem as relevant to me as some of our other... So it's great that it's going to inform, but I have a little concern that there might be too much... We can't give that the same weight that we would say give, some of the other things that we're looking at.
Or I would say, I don't want to lean on it, given that,
Yes.
nothing, some things, but not a lot has really been executed.
So much has changed.
Leaning on, that's probably what I was trying to say when I meant constrained.
Yeah.
I just don't want to be constrained by it or leaning on it at all.
I think it's a data point. I think equally as important is what were the obstacles that we encountered from 2013 to today that prevented more from going into place.
There you go.
Probably the most important thing
I
for
think
us
that's
to
critical.
focus
I bet
on.
those still exist.
Well,
I bet they do too.
Some.
But I want to validate the things that are
Yes,
there.
agreed.
And the way we do that is we have to take a little more of a
The new
dive into
technology
it.
gives you.
So, yeah. And since we're on the transportation sort of discussion right now, or just bike and ped?
Whatever you want.
Keep going.
Because transportation, there was data in there about the 2019, 2020 Metro data, and to me, that's almost
Irrelevant.
completely irrelevant at this point, I think. I understand that that is, as you stated in the report, it's the most recent data available.
Yeah.
But it doesn't change the fact that it's not useful. It's not something that we can rely on really to make great policy going forward. So I don't know how we solve that, but we need to solve it somehow.
On that point, though, I will say that, you're really starting to see reports of most companies by next year are planning on bringing their employees back, in a huge way, I think within the next year, even more so than we've seen in the past few years. So I think it's going to be hit or miss for probably at least another couple of years. But, I think there's no doubt, kind of based on this, that having the Metra here is still a huge draw for people. Now, what that ridership is going to look like long-term is still kind of up in the air. But
Kind of like the schools, shouldn't we be able to get some better input
ridership
from
data?
them?
I think we have
Well,
that ridership data.
CMAP and Metro together.
Somebody must
You
have.
get monthly ridership reports.
Well, but they're doing planning too. They're doing budgeting for
Yeah.
5 years out.
Yeah, I would just add, the one thing I thought was kind of interesting that maybe we could glean something from was just the percentages of folks who are walking and biking to the train. So even if the numbers are down, those percentages would likely hold
Yeah.
or be close. So it was just interesting to see Maine obviously having a high percentage of walkers across all the
Yeah.
stations, very, very low biking. But chicken and egg,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, and that's something, we should also keep in mind the fact that now Pace bus service is so dramatically reduced compared to what it used to be as well, that there might be more of an interest in having, you know, a biking option or other options now that Pace isn't an option if you don't have a car as well.
Bring
So.
back the Grove Shuttle.
Oh, man. Is there a secret tax there? You were wanting to weigh in. Yeah.
Yes, sir. I just wanted to mention that when it comes to the Metro ridership data, and this was something we discussed with staff a lot about, but what we found that was almost more important is the ridership on a station-by-station basis as well. So we could really understand who are the users and how are they getting there as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
beyond the kind of the obtuse information pre-COVID compared to now, finding out that actual ridership on a station-by-station basis would be very helpful. And we're still looking for that.
Yeah, okay.
The other piece of demographic information I thought was interesting is that, you know, and this was page 48, you know, the inflow, outflow job counts.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, 2,356 people living and employed here in Downers Grove. However, 20% of village residents reported working from home in 2022, which is not included as a separate category in the census source. I mean, that's a lot. And my guess is some of them would have been riding the train and aren't riding the train. Patterns have changed there. And then also it changes how they use village resources and so, I mean, that to me is something that's very relevant as well.
Directly related to that, I was wondering if we have any idea of that overlap from a historical perspective. You know, do we have more or fewer people who are living and working here? And because that might tell us a little bit of information as well. I would be really interested to, if we have any historical data about that overlap, I would love to see it.
In that data that I just read, that was 2021.
Right.
Too. So even that's 3 years.
Yeah.
Anyway, I was also kind of surprised. Basically, the population of the town doubles. People coming out
Yes.
from out places to work here.
Yes.
That's tells you a little something about maybe some of our traffic and congestion issues.
Yeah.
I guess I would be, I mean, now we're getting into some wishful thinking, but how that's changed over time.
That's pretty much been
Yeah.
consistent.
Yeah.
Our daytime population is about been double our nighttime.
Generally doubled, yeah.
It's pretty, I can remember talking about that.
Yeah, 20 years ago.
Okay.
So just another overarching comment, you know, for me, you know, a lot of this is, I mean, existing condition analysis here was extensive, useful, and it's very enlightening. You know, I've learned a lot. Just I haven't had my schedule hasn't allowed me to dive into this as much as some of you, but just in a quick read, boys, I wish I'd had this the day I joined Village Council.
Yeah.
You know, and staff did a wonderful job, you know, trying to get me up to speed. But I mean, this is just really, it is really informative. So, you know, once again, I was trying to mix the good with the bad here. I know we're nitpicking a little bit, but there's a lot of really great information in this. So I'm thankful for that.
Martin, what's on your mind?
No, I was gonna say, I don't know if we're there yet, but just I'm gonna channel Chris for a moment here and ask a data question. This is not particularly in order, but page 74, the crash breakdown, which is always interesting, but I'm almost afraid to ask what the red boxes reflect.
Oh.
So we have total crashes, and we have them broken down by vehicular, cyclist, and pedestrian, then below that, there's 14, 0, and 4. I have a guess what that means, but there's no legend or key.
Does it say what
says
that
what
is?
that stands for. That's what I'm guessing.
That's the page where underneath it talks about day and night too, right?
I believe you're correct, but I would have to turn that over to
Maybe
Aaron.
when Aaron gets up later, you can get that in the slides, I think.
I do know, I'm maybe stepping on Aaron's toes a little bit. I do know also, again, wishful thinking for additional data. I know that cyclist and pedestrian crashes are very underreported as well.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no way to,
Mhm.
they're underreported by
Cyclist crashes.
emergency responders on the scene and also just by people like, oh, that car bumped me in an intersection and now I've got a injured leg, but I didn't go to the doctor before I didn't report it.
I forgot to ask too, maybe going forward, if we could include links in the report to all the past plans and studies that are, I know early on that we had, as I started reading, there was a, you know, you could click a link to go look at the previous comp plan, but might be helpful as people are reading this to be able to click a link to go to see that 2013 bike and ped plan, that sort of thing. If it's possible to include those, I think that would be helpful.
All of those are on the village's website, right?
Yeah, so we'll be
Yeah,
able to throw some links
easy
up.
to just,
Easy to put in the library.
yeah.
One random question that I had in there, you know, when we were talking about the business surveys specifically, you know, it kind of gave us a percentage, like 11% said they were considering leaving Downers Grove. Is there any way to look at, for those who answered that, what kind of were their top cited reasons? Was it permitting? Was it zoning concern? You know, like, is there a way to kind of get at that data, or would it be too easy, too identifiable? You know what I mean? I know that with sometimes with small sample sizes, that can be a concern, and so you can't always report that out.
You can also reach out to EDC and do some attraction retention visits to
Yep.
those.
Yeah.
So maybe we can get that data, but if we get it
Yeah.
to EDC and they could do some retention visits.
Yeah, I was just curious.
I would have to, I don't know if those responses got that granular, I'd have to follow up
Right.
with all
Okay.
together.
I had a follow-up on that too. I mean, I saw that there were 152 participants in the business community survey, but only 30 were business owners.
Yeah.
Employees.
So,
You could take it. You could take it.
I mean, it would be nice to have much more input from our business owners than what was received.
I went to that.
So, well, you're one, and thank you for that. I'm glad that you participated. But we've got a lot of businesses in town, and I think we need a bigger sampling there.
Yeah.
Did EDC play any particular role in soliciting that kind of input?
Yeah, so we had EDC and both downtown management push out to their membership group to encourage them to take the survey. And then they both participated in interviews with Josh and his team, and I think downtown management participated on some of the downtown streetscape stuff too as well. So we've had pushes from EDC and downtown management to their groups.
What about the chamber?
I don't know that we reached out to the chamber. I'm not sure if they push stuff out to their group.
Hopefully we can try a little harder there.
Well, but I think the point of clarity there is, that's just the survey that they're talking about.
Yeah.
So we had survey plus these small
Yeah, we had a
focus group.
There was a
which
business
they were-
community workshop. It had 9 participants.
No, that's it?
That's what it said.
And now, again, it was based on a push out from our partners to try to get their folks to come in and participate in that.
See, this is one of my, kind of overarching feelings about this. I stated in the beginning, is that I feel like we're having some key takeaways. To me, they're very preliminary takeaways, because there's, I need more. I like a lot of the takeaways. A lot of the takeaways align with what I'd like to see happen. But this isn't about me. And it really needs to be reflective of the community, and I'm really hopeful that we're going to get more than what we've got here to better inform some of these takeaways, because ultimately, as you were, Mayor, explaining in the meeting earlier this evening, that everything going on 3 and 4 and 5 and years from now, councils are going to be looking at this and aligning what they're doing and making decisions based on this.
Yeah.
So I need more.
Related to that, this is in the editing nitpicking category, right? I can find my notes. The takeaways sections of each one, the ones, not the issues and opportunities ones, but sort of the intermediate takeaways.
Yeah.
95% of those, I'm making up the math, but most of them were statistical takeaways.
Yes.
But there were a few that were different than that. And that, I guess I'm thinking shouldn't quite be that way.
Right.
So, housing, trails, zoning, bike and ped, and that was it. Those 4 were different than all the rest. The rest were sort of statistical statements.
Yeah.
Which one's about?
Page 26, housing, trails, and zoning.
Yep.
And on page 32, bullet 2, bike and ped. All the rest of these are, sort of takeaways, not suggestions. The reason I'm pointing that out is because eventually this is going to become a document which we're all sitting there looking back at sometime.
Yep.
And the takeaways should be informing this group's decisions about issues and opportunities, not presenting issues and opportunities. That's why I said it was nitpicking.
Can I pick that a little further? We haven't gotten there yet, but the Fairview key takeaways are basically all policy recommendations.
Yeah.
I didn't get that far, sorry.
Yep. And I'm not there yet.
Yeah, and that's a sort of it's nitpicky, but it's a material part of the process. We start with the takeaways, and then we have these issues and opportunities, which then we sort of have to develop, right? And what's presented to us is issues and opportunities as a starting point. I mean, it's kind of like the council needs to say, do we see other issues and opportunities as well, right? And same thing on takeaways. But we got to be careful about wording.
I guess, Mayor, if I may, there is,
Yeah.
I mean, I agree with you, but there also is just a little bit of when we do planning, there's some of this is a science where we can measure real data points, especially census data, is pretty concrete. It's the most concrete that we have. But then some of it also is in our best practices. There's just pointing back to all those different ingredients that go into this. So, yeah, there should be certainly consistency across the different key takeaways. Some of them are, I guess, more. Some of them are more statistical, and some are more observations or
qualitative.
Yeah, qualitative. Like key takeaways from our land use assessment. There's no existing conditions, land use. There's, we could say what percentage of the observed land use is single-family homes, but it's a little bit different than the census data, for example.
I hadn't gotten as far as Greg, but taking, just example here. Streetscape character on page 41. Not fair that I'm doing this without being into it as deep as some of my colleagues are. But there's an example of, maybe, right? The takeaways, those are all sort of directions about what might be a good policy thing to consider. And, maybe, maybe not, right? The takeaway would be condition. The takeaway would be best practices outside of Downers Grove. The takeaway would be the input that we got from customers and residents about what they'd like. But then what those steps are with that data, this group would determine what we might want to get into. There may be things that we don't even want to get into, and I hate to put them in as sort of directive takeaways because, again, this document's going to be something that people are reading in and out of context of joining our meetings, in and out of context a year, 2 years from now, and just careful.
That's a good point.
What page is the takeaways? I'm sorry.
I was using as an example page 41 under streetscape.
But I wonder, I mean, part of me kind of took that as more of like we now kind of have these industry standards and best practices that like are consistent across community, you know what I mean? So I don't know if is that what plays a role in some of these takeaways, is just kind of industry standards have changed or best practices have changed since we last met, or is that what's kind of informing some of these more qualitative measures and the key takeaways?
It certainly could be, for the streetscapes, I might turn it over to Tim, but that is also the streetscapes plan. I view the comp plan and the bike ped plan are very comparable in their planning documents. We have data, we have community input. Streetscapes is a different animal sort of thing where it's much more concrete. We're talking about sidewalk width and street furniture and things where key takeaways are based on different things than these other two studies. And I think sustainability will probably be a different kind of thing over here. So there could be a different way to talk about them.
It could be as easy as changing the headline, right? I mean, it's really more of an issue and opportunity as opposed to a takeaway. At least that's the way I read the
observation. Yeah, and when we get into this sort of the Downers Grove speak on this, is I think that the comp plan is at the 30 and 40,000 foot level of our flight analogy in terms of policies, issues, takeaways, and that streetscape plan, because the ultimate deliverable is a design development set of drawings, it drops to the 10,000 and 20,000 foot in our flight analogy, and I think that drives a lot of the different approaches. They're both appropriate, but we're literally going to have a plan that Tim and his team are going to put on the table for us to react to, set of drawings to build from, and the other ones are like policies and recommendations.
We've really struggled with trying to make that separation between key takeaways and issues and opportunities, just as you're discussing, because it's difficult to find statistical data on what's the right configuration of all the different components that make the street what it should be. We have a lot of experience with it, and we can point to other communities and what they've done, that sort of thing. But it's just not really statistical data that.
Yeah, and I think I worry a little bit about limiting some of that, just simply because I feel like then that puts the onus on us to come up with the ideas.
I'm not necessarily thinking we should limit it.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure we characterize it properly.
Just label it. Relabel.
I mean, it is under the issues and opportunities section of it. Their key takeaways is a subtitle, if I'm on the right page.
Yeah, but if you're flowing through all the different reports, you look at the key takeaways are
fair
one thing,
enough.
and the issues and observations are.
So I don't know. I kind of like this one because I think one of the points, we looked at the data, people love the character of the community, and one of the key takeaways was that we don't have a cohesive character in our streetscapes.
That's the takeaway.
Yeah, but that's also a
But the next thing
policy.
The next
like,
thing
do
is
we
an
want
issue
to?
or an opportunity.
Okay. Okay.
I'm just trying to have.
Yeah,
the
you know,
structure.
it's fair. I actually thought those were some good. I commend the feedback we received, and I think it's valuable for us when it isn't about data. As you see, I'm fairly data focused. When it isn't about data, we have to make decisions on things. I look to these experts to do that. Now, I know we're going to have a second phase where we're going to get perhaps recommendations, but this helped me to start thinking about things. And the character of the streetscape being cohesive was not something that I thought of until it was articulated in this. And tied to the data that we received on the surveys about the community and its character is one of the most important things that people see as a strength of our community. So it isn't in my mind, I connect those to say we're not reflecting the character in our streetscape. That is a takeaway to me.
Greg's point about it's not so much about content, it's about format and presentation and wording. Chris, I agree with you, but you could easily see a situation where one group of people would say they want to intentionally create different feeling portions of our community, and another who would say they want to intentionally tie them together, right? So either of those are opportunities. We'd have to pick a direction. But the takeaway is we don't have one right now, right? That there's no consistency to it, there's no plan to it. And so
I would
it's
agree. And I'm thinking
that's what
I
Greg's
guess-
trying to slice the wording just right.
Right, and I'm thinking about our obligation to make sure that we don't set the wrong expectations. You know, I think it was the 2017 plan where there were different options floated toward the end of it, and one of the concepts was scaling back the 75th and Lamont development and having some multifamily put in there. And it didn't take more than 10 minutes before all of a sudden we were knocking down every business at 75th and Lamont and putting up a bunch of apartments that the neighborhood didn't want, right? So we have to make sure that we frame these things right so that people don't end up
I still can
wearing
ask that
tinfoil
question.
hats. Yeah, I got it about a week ago.
I think with the mayor's comments earlier, I understand your point very clearly. I think the only difference for me is that we have community input. We surveyed, people said, our character is important. The character of the town is very important. And this is a way I think we can exemplify it. So to me, it was good. I just don't want to limit that, that's all. I'll leave it at that.
I don't want to be out of line here, I'll make a suggestion, if that's okay with the mayor and council. It's 9:30, we're having a great discussion on the first of 3 reports, and we're kind of actually starting to talk about the other ones.
Yeah.
Perhaps we should hear from the other 2 presenters, Aaron and
Love
Tim,
it.
at some point, if that's all right with you.
Was that a takeaway or an opportunity?
It's both.
It's an issue.
He started
Definitely an
with the
issue.
takeaway and then got to
If
the
that's all right,
opportunity.
I didn't want to.
No, thank you for that, Dave. We're not watching the clock, we're just having a good
Yeah,
conversation.
yeah.
That's a good call.
Move on.
I'll turn it over to Aaron then. And it is a good opportunity to hear from them because I think on the 9th it will be just me, so.
Me too.
They're shorter.
Oh, I should have had that slide up this whole time.
It didn't stop us.
Thank you. Oh, good evening, folks. Aaron Tooley with Baxter and Woodman. Very illuminating discussion we've had so far. I'm really looking forward to hearing your thoughts about the existing conditions when it comes to bike ped stuff. I did want to mention that, just as a reminder, that we are, and I want to share with you all some of the draft guiding principles that we've developed, having discussed with you all that whole pedestrian first kind of program and consideration. But one of the key principles that I wanted to bring up now, or a reminder, is that we are really looking at bike ped, active transportation stuff, facilities improvements, as much more utilitarian than recreational, of course. And then the other thing is that because we have the benefit of working on your mobility transportation element of the comprehensive plan, that's enabling us to be much more multimodal in focus as well. So how do all of these different modes kind of fit together and resonate? Very quickly, this is how we've organized our existing conditions memorandum. We did provide kind of a historical overview in the very beginning. We went back and forth as far as whether we should include this or not. We have always found that whenever it comes to key strategies or recommendations, a lot of them are grounded in a historic precedent. So we always like to just make sure that you all understand the history of the village, where you all have come from, et cetera, because it might resonate sometime in the future. We have provided an overview of the accomplishments since the 2013 plan. We kind of drilled down pretty deeply with the 2013 plan, as you all will see. And I might offer in reflecting about that, the idea that we really, as a village, we haven't made as many improvements as one might think, as you all were alluding to, since the 2013 plan. And I'm wondering if that is not a fact or an illustration of the lack of the requisite regulatory environment that causes these things to happen in other communities. So something to think about. We also provide a fairly thorough assessment of your existing thoroughfares, both in the comp plan, ECM, as well as the bike ped plan, as well as intersections as well. Excuse me. Again, we also are very interested in the public transportation element as it relates to bike ped facility improvements, not only your metro stations, but also your PACE bus routes. One slide that we did have in here was a really good map that shows your PACE bus routes, and especially the ones that have been discontinued since. And it kind of, again, reflects that these bus routes are going to all of the key commercial retail centers, but they're not necessarily going to all of where people work. And so are we really getting the biggest bang for our buck when it comes to our bus public transit? Again, we did drill pretty deeply down in the 2013 plan, and we also provided a bit of an overview of our public outreach. So when it comes to the regulatory environment, we studied all of your 9 neighborhood traffic studies. We also, again, gleaned what we could out of the 2013 plan. But we also looked at village regulations and policy in the context of DuPage County and IDOT, as well as national regulations, especially when it comes to electric bicycles and e-scooters as well. All states are kind of lagging behind that, but and by default, the village is kind of looking to DuPage County as well as the state as far as what are those regulations guiding or governing the use of e-cycles, bicycles, and e-scooters. And I'll go over this very kind of generally, but when it comes to the neighborhood traffic studies, those are very in-depth when it comes to specific safety improvements, when it comes to ADA compliance, improving crosswalks, coming up with traffic or speed reduction kind of techniques, changes in signage, especially focused on when it comes to safe routes to schools and parks as well. So those are important takeaways. But when it comes to more of the regulatory kind of takeaways, the one thing that we were looking at is what do we lack as a village compared to what other villages or communities have. We don't have a complete streets policy, as we've talked about in the past. The village doesn't have a Vision Zero kind of policy or program. Other communities do. DuPage County does have a complete streets program. They also have a safe streets for all program. So all of these we'll look into in greater depth as we move forward in the planning of this whole program. But so we were interested in what are we lacking as a village that might generate more or stimulate more of these kind of physical facility improvements when it comes to bike and ped facility improvements. From a facilities and thoroughfare standpoint, as Josh had mentioned, there are ample north-south arterial connections as well as east-west connections. These are very large arterial. The functional classification of most of these are arterial, major or minor arterial thoroughfares. Great for moving vehicular traffic, not that great for pedestrian traffic. So that's a problem. And that's a takeaway as well. On another note, mainly your collectors and local streets, they all have on-street parking. So that's another kind of takeaway that just adds another ingredient of complexity to how do we shoehorn in these kind of facilities into an existing right-of-way. Another complexity is that most of your arterial thoroughfares are under the jurisdiction of DuPage County Division of Transportation, so there will need to be a whole coordination dimension when it comes to improvements to those thoroughfares. Principally, your active transportation network consists of bike routes and sidewalks. As we've talked about, there are very few dedicated on-street bike lanes. There are no protected on-street bike lanes whatsoever. So we are of the mind that first of all, whatever we come up with, it's going to take a variety of different facility types. You're not going to have one main kind of facility running through your entire village from an east, west, or north, south standpoint, probably. But then from another standpoint, we would want to ensure that any on-street bike lanes would be protected bike lanes, and that's going to add probably another 1.5 feet of width to an on-street bike lane, which makes that much more difficult. We also noted with the bike routes, there is some level of disconnectivity between bike routes. Signage is not consistent throughout. We've done our best to identify where all the signs are, but we have noticed that the lack of signage in key junctures could lead to problems. So that's an issue. But we did compare, and our public engagement program is ongoing, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But one thing we've done recently with the Downers Grove Bike Club was we asked them to identify the key routes they like to cycle on versus the ones that they do not like to bike on. And interestingly, the bike routes were the ones that they really liked to ride on rather than than any other thoroughfares. So thought that was interesting, although we've heard anecdotally that the origins of the bike route program in Downers Grove came from, and you might know this more than I, please correct me if I'm wrong, but we had heard that it had been started by an Eagle Scout or a Boy Scout working on an Eagle Scout project where he was trying to link historically significant structures throughout the community. And so that was the advent of this whole bike route program. But needless to say, again, your active transportation network is composed of bike routes and sidewalks. Over the last since the 2013 bike ped plan, we do have a map showing all of the sidewalk improvements that have been made over the last 10 or 11 years. So that's on the one hand great, but there's still a long way to go when it comes to filling in all of those gaps. And that's going to be one of our next steps, is to do a more thorough gap analysis when it comes to where are the gaps in the key sidewalks and other facilities. When it comes to your interstates, I-88, I-355, they pose a significant barrier, particularly for pedestrians trying to get to northern areas of the community. That's another issue. Any questions before I move on? When it comes to, again, issues and opportunities, one thing that's key, limited right-of-way width. I mean, your rights-of-way have not only a thoroughfare, curb and gutter, drainage infrastructure, trees, sidewalks, signage, utility poles, all sorts of stuff. So that's an issue in that, as I'd mentioned earlier, you're only going to be able to shoehorn so many additional facilities into some of these thoroughfares. Another key issue, major problems at some of your key intersections pedestrians crossing intersections, particularly on Ogden, for example, as well as 75th Street and other principal arterial thoroughfares. The general lack of bike-only kind of facilities and protected facilities, that makes things difficult. Opportunities are to the converse of the issues. I mean, there are always ways that we can improve some of these key intersections. What's going to be key, what's going to be important is that we focus in on which intersections we really want to improve, because there will invariably be some kind of trade-off, right, to where somebody's going to be, something's not going to be as efficient potentially. Increasing safety at crosswalks, important. There was we did this kind of crosswalk analysis as well, where there's, for lack of a better term, a variety of different crosswalk treatments. So trying to improve continuity or consistency in the treatment of some of these safety improvements would be important.
Sorry, before you go any further, I think you missed the top opportunity. I didn't quite, on the right-hand side, the adding the bike lanes. I didn't.
Off-street facilities, too.
Wait.
Yeah, we think that there hopefully are opportunities for increasing the number of off-street shared use facilities, which when we say off-street, that could be 6 feet off of the back of curb, or they could be right on the back of curb, but somehow creating that separation between bike and ped facilities from your thoroughfare.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other thoughts, questions? Okay. Let me just show a couple things. So the way we had phased our work was slightly different than the comprehensive plan, but we are now immersed in a variety of different assessments that kind of goes beyond. It's what we've learned from our existing conditions, and it's taking it beyond that into like, okay, what exactly does this mean? So you'll get some greater issues and opportunities, more sophisticated takeaways, et cetera. But so developing an origin destination analysis. Where are people trying to get to, from where and how? That's going to be very important, because that will help us to then start to limit down which facilities do we want to focus on. The demand-based assessment, as we were talking about, the community survey is still open. We're still having meetings with, and we'll continue to have ongoing meetings with the Bike Club and other groups. But the demand-based assessment at some point will cut off, and that this will reflect everything that we've heard from your community. The equity assessment will look at how the equitable implementation of bike and ped facilities throughout your community when it comes to, this gets back into the demographics, your aging populations, where are those concentrations, impoverished areas, et cetera. We want to make sure that there is equity throughout. Resource-based assessment, what resources might we tap into beyond just thoroughfares to help improve connectivity and accessibility? Then we're again in the midst of this whole connectivity assessment, looking at this, developing this gap analysis, but also connections to neighboring municipal facilities, regional trails, et cetera. So how do we're not only looking inward, but we're also looking outward as far as how do we make sure there is that connectivity as well. And then for lack of, I'm never able to come up with a better title for that kind of assessment, but what is possible assessment, looking at your thoroughfares or your right-of-way and figuring out what is possible. Is it possible that we could move a curb inward a little bit, or outward, excuse me, so we could create a protected bike lane, on-street bike lane? So what's possible within the bounds of your village rights-of-way? All of those are going to lead to better informed decisions, more of a narrowing of, or a reducing of different options that we have to really create this kind of multimodal, safe, accessible network of ped bike facilities. So just very quickly about next steps. Of course, we're going through the visioning workshops in July. We have developed some guiding principles that we just wanted to share with you the drafts of very quickly. I did want to remind everyone that we had in our scope developing these tactical urbanism demonstrations. So when we do come up with some potential solutions, where can we just test it out so we know what the implications of these are? We can understand how people react to these kind of improvements. So that's something we're going to want to bear in mind as we go through this. We'll also be developing strategies and recommendations, but importantly, it's coming up with these policies that you all can hang your hats on, so to speak, that are community driven. And then, of course, we'll have our implementation plan as well as performance measures, and then we'll summarize all of this for your comprehensive plan. But the one thing we did want to just share with you, albeit very briefly, and we shared the guiding principles with the Transportation and Parking Commission. We have not shared these performance measures because we want to get your buy-in or your feedback on that. But so right now we have basically 8 different guiding principles. These are the lenses through which we will evaluate all improvements that we're recommending. So accessibility, we've talked about. A lot of these were driven or informed by our first meeting that we had with you all. Accessibility, connectivity, especially between different modes of transportation. Of course, safety, aesthetics. These things have got to blend into the character of your community, of the character of your neighborhoods, of your other districts. Intentionality, whatever we're doing, once we're developing this, that you all are moving forward with the requisite tools that you have to make better informed decisions, and we can implement this with intentionality. We'll be providing you with recommended different funding programs, particularly, of which there are a whole lot right now out there for active transportation improvements. Implementability, we want this plan to be a dog-eared kind of sticky notes all through it, that kind of thing, that it's used, and it's something that all the recommendations are implemented. Longevity, we want to make sure that these recommendations are enduring, and that the improvements that we're recommending they have a fairly long lifespan or shelf life. This performance one is, we're still working on that, but it's more of it's a policy-driven program. That's what we're trying to develop. And we also like to have 8, not 7. But so the main thing about performance is how do we make sure that this whole planning program is driven by sound, community-driven policies. This is what we typically use when we're going into a whole kind of strategic planning program. After we go through the visioning, we'll be developing goals and objectives, strategies, courses of action, but they'll all be driven by looking through these things through the lens of the guiding principles. At the back end, we want to have metrics or performance measures that you all can use to track your progress in implementing these strategies. So the FHWA has come out with this is kind of old, but one of the guidebooks that we've used is from the Federal Highway Administration, but they have a whole litany of different metrics and indicators that we can use to, again, track our progress. So these are several that we've come up with. I'd like to come up with at least 20, but I'm sure there are probably more. But when it comes to miles of pedestrian bicycle facilities, that's kind of a no-brainer. Crashes, or the reduction in crashes, etc. Connectivity index, all those kind of things. We want to make sure that you all have the tools in your toolbox to be able to measure how you're doing on a year-by-year basis. So with that, I think that's where we are right now. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Dave, what else is planned for this evening? We got one more
We got
presentation.
Tim's presentation on streetscapes.
Yeah,
We're gonna run out of time.
run out of juice.
So I'll make a suggestion, and maybe we'll hear Tim's, and then start thinking about July 9th and the further conversation on it. So
Yeah, I think we should do that.
Sure.
I think this
Thanks
will
a
go
lot.
in a couple hours.
All right.
I'm toast here.
So as was already mentioned, streetscapes is just a little bit different in that was a good analogy that instead of looking at things at 30,000 feet, we're looking at it more at 10,000 feet and even at, right there, right at ground level. So, and our goal is what we've been tasked with is coming up with a design solution, concept level design solution that is applicable to the different areas. So maybe a little different, but we're going through the same process that everybody else is going through and participating in the same ways. It's organized all in the same way. We were involved in the introductory from the get-go, same community outreach and stakeholder meetings as well. We did also evaluate the existing streetscape conditions. That was a big thing that we did, which is in the document, and we can get into those at another time if you have questions about specific things. But what we did instead of actually mapping every foot of every street, we picked what were the what we call prototypes or typicals for the different types of streets and evaluated those, and that's what's in the document that we based that on. The Fairview Focus Area streetscape and the downtown streetscape were the two areas we were asked to look at, but also the connection between the two as we got into it is clearly an important thing. So we actually created a separate group for that. And we know that the village is also studying the zoning changes in that Fairview Focus Area as well, so that's all part of what we're getting into. So, and then saying key takeaways and issues and opportunities that come out of that. So, how do we define the streetscape? I mentioned that part of it was what was given to us as the scope of the work was to look at the downtown and the Fairview Focus Area connection in between. But it's really the areas, what defines the streetscape in these areas are, it's the areas where there's a significant amount of pedestrian activity, and it's usually where there's mixed use development going on. Why isn't Ogden Avenue streetscape? Well, that's kind of a corridor level improvement. It's just a little bit different thing that maybe has a little bit different feel. But one of the things that we typically see is that if we develop the streetscapes plan for these areas, the same logic, the same types of improvements can apply to those other areas. And that could even be a little bit further study to show how those could apply to those areas. So here's the getting into the key takeaways, and again, as was already touched on, it is a little tricky to start to make these just plain, here's what we've heard, without starting to evaluate what we see and what maybe are the components that should make up a streetscape. So we probably have a little more work to do here to make sure that we're not overreaching and getting into projecting what maybe are more issues and opportunities as part of this. But these are the things that we heard and have heard and have observed. So the streetscape character itself. So without getting into what it should be, the streetscape character matters. And that's something that we've heard, and that's something we need to take into consideration as we develop new opportunities and improvements. Also, the consistency. There's a reality that maybe some streets or some areas, the streetscape is improved and maybe maintained better. In other areas, it's maybe not quite so much. And what are the reasons why? That's something that we probably need to dig into more as well. Why might one area be perceived
that gets more streetscape improvements than others. A lot of times it's really based on development. So if a new development comes in, then that streetscape's going to be developed to a standard, and that's what's driving sometimes those new improvements as opposed to a village-wide streetscape improvement, which is when the downtown streetscape was done originally, that was a streetscape project that was done very consistently at one time. And then another thing that comes up quite a bit with streetscapes is, so what do you do in that transition period? Say, for example, in the Fairview streetscapes area, some properties are identified through your other study that this might be a good opportunity for some redevelopment to occur. Well, we're going to do improvements now, and these streetscape recommendations are going to be happening, but streetscape is very much dependent on what is happening with the adjacent properties, so it can be a little tricky to figure out what's the right approach to that. But we know it's a key takeaway is we need to understand or address that as we're moving through things. Here's the big one, that outdoor dining versus parking and just pedestrian thoroughfare space. Aaron touched on the limited space within a right-of-way, all these things you have to accommodate. Some people, some portion of the population really thinks outdoor dining is a great thing. Other portions of the population, that's taking away from the other uses that are necessary within that limited space. So there's that's something we need to explore and just determine what maybe are some best practices that other people have done that we can maybe bring forward, and then look at the physical space that might be available and see just what can and maybe even doesn't work in certain areas. Also part of that is just what the village is doing now as it relates to outdoor dining, because this is already happening, and so what's working and not working. Again, observations, anecdotal information, whatever statistical information we can get from that will help us with some of those options that we might come up with. And then another thing that came up in kind of that same conversation is, so the programmed events that occur. So if the village has a special night and they close down a section of street, or if there's a festival, or if there's a farmer's market. So how does the streetscape need to be configured in order to accommodate that and try to create a balance? I think, Aaron, you mentioned it as well, that in some situations, not everybody's going to be happy, but what's the right way to balance it for the typical type use? This one goes to that, almost the character again. We heard more than once in both the first outreach meeting and the interviews and everything else that is there maybe an opportunity to include more cultural amenities and public art, and a logical place for that to go would be in the streetscape environment. Exactly how and what that is, that hasn't been determined, but it was brought up as something to think about. And then the last one is just all the streetscape components. We actually went, and it's in the report, I won't go into that tonight, but what do you have? What are the benches? What are the lights? What's the paving? What's going on with it? And generally speaking, for the downtown area, things are well maintained and things are working pretty well. For the Fairview area, it's not quite there, and so we need to kind of focus on that, which is why it's in the study area there. The issues and opportunities, honestly, are a lot of those same things, but this is where we're now getting into maybe a little more discussion about what maybe we could do about that. Actually, in the report, under each of these items, we have specific bullet points of issues and opportunities. We had them in. We took them out thinking maybe we're going too far, and then we put them back in because it was good information just to have to go back and assess against. How we work this out so it aligns properly in the existing conditions report versus when we move forward with developing concepts and things. I think we can work with the staff and come to something that makes sense.
for this report anyway. Discussion, I'll just go to the next step since I know we're running short on time. So for the visioning study, the streetscapes will be a topic within that, but honestly, I mean, if people want to get into the detail of streetscapes, that's great. We're kind of thinking that they're going to probably be looking at a lot of the other topics that you've been talking about. Not that they don't care about streetscape, but what we've seen in other projects we've worked on is, you know, after we move forward, we're going to start to develop alternative streetscape concepts, and those are going to be, okay, we can do it this way, or this way. It can look like this, or this. And that's when we really start to get some good feedback. You know, is this the right balance? Is it too much of this or too much of that? And so we can really start to get a lot of feedback there. So we're not necessarily concerned about getting that feedback. It's just maybe gonna kind of be a little further down in the process before we get more of that part of things. So kind of race through that, but we, you know, through staff comments or anything else, we'd be happy to answer more questions. Yep.
Just, I got a real quick question on this. With your typical streetscape maps, those diagrams, if those are meant to be, if you're actually looking at an intersection, you know what I'm talking about, it would be helpful to label the street and have a north arrow there. If they're meant to be more diagrammatic and you kind of like grabbed a little of this and a little bit of this to create this diagram.
They're generally based on specific locations, but just what you mentioned, we did include some things just so we covered all the bases. Because what we were kind of running into is there might be 4 or 5 different prototypes that if you were to look at it, you probably wouldn't tell what the difference is because they're so similar, but they aren't exactly the same. So
accept the challenge.
So, you know, it's kind of managing the amount of information too without doing a full streetscape plan for all the streets. So, but yeah, I mean, if there are specific things, we can take that into consideration for sure and add more labels to make it more clear.
Thank you.
So on the ped and bike plan and the streetscape thing, are we feeling good about holding that conversation? We need to have a conversation, just like we had the first one, and maybe even more than once. But I'm thinking it doesn't make a lot of sense to start in that right now.
I agree.
So start there on July 9th, Mayor?
Yeah, or in August. Yes.
Got it.
We normally take a little input from the public, and I still want to do that, just to kind of keep with our tradition. I'll just remind everybody that what you heard tonight is we're looking for input. Don't freak out about anything you heard, because this is a group of people trying to figure stuff out.
Okay, I'm glad that you
Start
had
there
it.
and go that way.
I'm glad you had it up there that at the meeting that I did attend, Mayor, they did say that there wasn't very enough opportunity to put outdoor dining anywhere but in the parking spaces. And that is where I heard it from when I entered that meeting. But anyway, so I didn't make it up or hear from anybody else. I went to the meeting and I heard about eliminating parking there. Another gentleman that was there has a business, a dentist, across the railroad tracks on this north side. And he said he feels like when you're doing the downtown, you take care of everything on the south side of the railroad tracks, and there's no consistency on the north side. And I think that's what you were addressing, Mr. Bill Martin, was he was saying there's no flower plants over there, but you put them all down here, and you think of the other side of the railroad tracks like last. Also, when you're talking about the seniors and the poverty level, I think just because I've been in business here in town for this many years, my clients have aged. I haven't, but they have. And they're single, they're older people, their husband is passed on, they're not getting 2 Social Securities now, you know, and the pensions that their husbands worked are not like the pensions they're going to have now. They didn't do IRAs and they didn't do any of that. They don't have the income. they're living in those 900,000 square foot house, one bathroom, and it's cheaper for them to stay there than to be put in facility because they don't have that kind of income. And there isn't really anything here. Their kids have stayed here, and I can give you tons of names. Their kids have stayed here, and there isn't really a lot of senior places that is on a sliding scale. One of my clients, she just had to move over by Edwards Hospital in Naperville, and a facility there for seniors that is on a sliding scale. There is some here, but there's such a long waiting list. And she was in a tri-level home, and she was basically living with a little college refrigerator and microwave in her low level because it had a bathroom. And that was the easiest way for her. So that's where I think that you're getting it. Also, apartment, when you say apartment, I think they think that people that live in apartments aren't vested in the community. When you have a renter, a home on either side of you, they're not vested in that. They're there for a couple of years and they move on. And sometimes if you have a bad renter that's living by you, you get a bad taste in your mouth. You know, so I think that's the issue when people are getting upset. But when you're buying a condo or you're buying a townhouse, you're at least investing in Downers Grove. And I think people feel a lot more comfortable when you're saying you're building something like that as opposed to apartments. Because a lot of those people, they're not there long term. They're there short term. Just my thoughts.
I'm going to keep my mouth shut. For now.
Which way are we going?
Go ahead.
Okay. As for the apartments that you were talking about and housing, the apartments and the buildings, they're on the sidewalk. There is no streetscape, there's no greenery. Townhouses have lawns and maybe small, but greenery around them. The ones at Rogers and Washington are charming looking. I think they're too stuffed in there, but the units themselves and the layout with the lawn, same with the ones over on Gilbert, that it is a warm and homey feeling and it doesn't look like a concrete dump. So, and the other objection to the apartments is density. It's too dense, getting too dense downtown now, and that's a problem in my view. Anyway, the study and the data-driven stuff, in my opinion, looking at this, I was surprised to see that Washington Street is not considered a thoroughfare. It is one of the north-south traffic patterns to get into the downtown from the north side. And maybe that's why it's become such a nightmare, because it was overlooked in here as to anything important. It's not named even as one of the 6 crossings, one of the 5 that are on grade, and it is the only one that is not straight. It is a nightmare. It's going to be worse when the Lot 2 units are on. I found out that there's going to be the exit from the new Village Hall for the fire department, or the police department, with sirens and lights coming out of there, is going to load on to Washington Street. That's going to give some driver a heart attack when they're trying to cross the tracks. It is a nightmare. And so my concern, that's already done. I don't know what the input was. I didn't know I had to be part of these meetings to get my opinion across at that point. But if that's the quality of the input, then the assumptions may need to be questioned, because it is a huge, in my opinion, shortcoming that Washington Street hasn't been characterized with the importance that it has. And it may be the number of people, the traffic patterns or whatever, in sheer numbers don't add up to what your standards were. But in terms of the qualitative piece of that crossing, the anxiety and the stress
that it puts on drivers crossing that southbound lane is not calculated in here, and that was an enormous mistake. It is. And lastly, on terms of, and I do take exception, Mayor, to your remarks tonight. I will not take offense because you are always so gracious to us, and on more than one occasion, I've been grateful for that. So the downtown parking spaces for the outdoor dining, just because people like it or don't like it, should not be the only calculation as to whether it's a good thing or not. It's not fair to the other business owners. It's not a good use of taxpayer money to favor one kind of business. And so, yeah, people like it. Okay, well, then eat at Capri, the Capri location, or the pizza place over, or wherever, whether it's already available. It is not right or fair to take away the opportunities for other people to come in and have a place to park. Saturday morning with the market was, you could not move, you couldn't find a place to park. Drove around several times to get a place to park to go to the market. Coming out on Curtis going over to the post office, you can hardly get through where those barricades are, and nobody's sitting there at 10 o'clock in the morning. You are setting up a program that's going to be not used most of the time. And in terms of, and this I will finish, whether or not, where people are getting their ideas, and I will not stop. I'm one of the perpetrators. I'm not going to stop because they take your own words, and I'm very careful about being correct in that the downtown outdoor dining program in your description consists of creating permanent public and private areas for use as outdoor cafes. Outdoor cafes can be located in a variety of areas, including on-street parking spaces, sidewalks, alleys, and parking lots. Sidewalks may be physically expanded to accommodate areas for outdoor cafes. That means eliminating parking spaces because that's the only place they can be expanded. Some existing on-street parking spaces may be permanently removed. Some can be all. And so who knows what it's going to look like. But these are your words, and when I came to the coffee at the fire station, and I asked, how does one stop this if you don't like it? Your answer was, well, there are 5 votes here that really think this is a good idea. So however it shapes, or whatever it looks like at the end of the day, that is another contribution to the notion that whatever it's going to be is a done deal, because it's already what you guys want to do. Those are your words, not mine. I take them away, and I will say that I am very careful about being accurate when I talk about this stuff, and using your words. So I really do hope that this exercise on the outdoor dining thing will get some equal attention for those people who want a place to park so they can come down and enjoy the village amenities. So thank you, and thank you for thank you.
Thank you, New York. In my design background, I'm going to have opinions, and I don't have them yet. I saw the frame being painted tonight, so I know all these different dimensions, sorry, that you have to struggle with. And I also, as you're struggling with them, it's interesting to hear the public input at the meetings and right here tonight, that we in the public tend to look at some very concrete specifics while you're struggling with putting this whole picture together. When I get to the point where I have the concrete opinions too, I'm going to come out with them then. For now, I don't, so I'm not going to try to put them on. Stan, I guess you're...
I have no comments on there, thank you.
Talk to me. One, I saw very early in the overview you talked about recreation and people love it and they want more of it. That seems more like a park district vibe, and so I'm wondering if you have a mechanism for liaising with or sharing this information with the park district so they can pick up the stuff that the village decides isn't in your bailiwick, that it gets sent over to them as good, reliable, well-gathered information. So hopefully they can run with it. I'm wondering, and maybe this was said before and it was one of the meetings I missed, is all this data and stuff including unincorporated downers or the boundaries of downers? So it's not. Okay, I don't have an opinion, I just wondered. So the statistics aren't, the census data and all that is not including unincorporated downers in those numbers? Okay, that's fine, I just wondered.
If you look at those maps, it's a good clarification. If you look at those maps in particular, there's some fuzziness around the edges. We're not sort of intentionally including a geographical area.
Okay.
Census tracts.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, good, thank you. I kind of agree that in terms of getting young people's input and apartment dwellers' input, they may just be people who don't feel as big a stake in the process. When I was 22, I didn't know anything, let alone where I was going to be living or have any ideas about what made a nice place to live or whatever. So I think it's great to go hard after that input as much as you can, but they may just really not know or care. I don't know. But I kind of think that might be part of that. And finally, we were talking about regulating e-scooters and e-bikes, and I will say it again, golf carts. Do not leave out the golf carts. They will sneak up on you and you'll be sorry. So just, when we're talking e-vehicles like that, whether we want golf carts, or maybe that's being regulated from on high, but maybe we should throw that in there as I mentioned. Thank you.
I took a little bit different tack. I went through and picked out, took notes on phrases that I wanted to add voice to, and I realized the first piece is redundant because you talked about this extensively, but I'm just adding my voice to it, that families with school-age children is the fastest declining household group in the village, and the senior population is the fastest growing age group. That's resulting in a mismatch in the types of housing, and it's expected to widen as the median family size continues to decline. Therefore, housing supply represents a significant challenge in the village. Available housing types are making home ownership less attainable. Renters are at risk of displacement due to greater financial pressure. Stakeholder input and community feedback underscore a pressing need for more affordable housing, particularly for essential workers, seniors, and individuals with disabilities. Someone quoted a number earlier about how many people come here to work. Maybe it's because they can't afford to live here. The other thing that I want to draw attention to is my passion, which I know you all know about, culture and public art. And I'm sorry I'm reading from the report, but again, I just want to add my voice to this because they've already said it so well, why rewrite it in my words. The report notes that currently there are limited cultural or public art components within the village streetscape. So there is an opportunity to better represent the community's character, heritage, and values, foster a sense of pride, and attract visitors by including cultural references and public art within the streetscape environment. It also notes that the Fairview Focus Area Streetscape Plan should investigate the feasibility of a cultural and public component, and that there are no public art or cultural activities within the connection area. I support that. Thank you.
Hi. You've done a wonderful job in terms of the population of Downers Grove. I've got a question because I didn't hear about it. How many students in our education department are involved with IEPs? And that is a very strong population that we need to focus in on because those persons who are in IEPs will be graduating at the age of 18. And once they graduate at the age of 18, they're going to be in need of housing, resources, and so forth. And when I go to the Park District on Belmont, what I see are buses pulling up with C-SPARK populations. And they utilize the public parks for recreation. And when I was involved in social work, we also used the special education programs and also, a lot of the special Olympics and so forth. Some of our people even went down to Springfield to compete. We also see disabled people working in our grocery stores, and they're very easy to identify, and frequently they're baggers, cashiers, something along those lines. And in my previous life, millions of years ago, I was involved with 4 different programs where we set up housing for people with disabilities in the community. And in that, we frequently work with village leaders, because when you approach the community with questions such as even apartment dwellings, what you get is the not in my backyard type of issue. And therefore, the communities that we work with, we're very interested in having persons with disabilities in scattered site housing. Since you are referring frequently to us still being at 30,000 feet, it allows us to plan, because if this is going to be a priority for this community, and in terms of priorities, when I worked with these 4 separate programs, we were talking about placing somewhere around 20 people in the community. So we're not talking about hundreds of people or anything of that. And they were all community residents, who had aged out of the school system, or, were in nursing homes and needed to return, etc. We worked with the village leaders. And at 30,000 feet, if this is going to be a priority, what we need to do is we need to begin exploring things such as HUD grants. Think grants that are available through various programs, either through the state or through the county, to provide funding for living arrangements for the individuals. If we don't begin exploring that, the individuals with disabilities will need to have assistance. And what we are basically saying is we are not welcoming them in our town. So that is an issue that I would like to ask at a 30,000-foot level, if this is going to be a priority on a very small level for the council. Thank you.
Did you have something?
Yeah, I'd just like to circle back to something you said before, and take exception, I suppose, was the word. I'll go ahead and take exception with the mischaracterization of what we heard tonight about parking downtown. Some does not mean all. And
Can mean all.
some, sorry, I've got some, it could also mean none, thank you, Murray. Some does not mean all, and so running around telling people that we're going to eliminate all parking downtown is simply false. It is counterfactual, 100%. And what you're doing is creating misinformation out there in an effort to drive your preferred policy position, and I think that's the wrong thing to do for the community. Thank you, Mayor.
Anything else from the council for this evening? Mike?
I'll also throw in a little something here. I mean, earlier this evening, we heard a comment about hitting the accelerator, and I think what you heard tonight hopefully was a lot of pumping the brakes. I mean, we're talking about having additional meetings about this, and diving into this pretty deep, and so we're going to be really careful about what we do going forward, and we are listening to what you all have to say. Thank you.
Yeah, I would.
You're saying that you're going to be completing this by spring of 2025, so that means you're going to have some decisions by then, which is 9 months away.
There are
So-
going to be some decisions made by this council in the next 10 months, and it is entirely likely that if I go around this room, there will not be unanimity of opinion about the quality of those decisions. I would bet my next paycheck on that. That is part of what 7 people have to do as part of their job for serving the community. And doing so in such a way that results in somebody not liking it is not the same as not listening, and is not the same as not serving. The good news is, we're not doing it tonight. The good news is, we're still soliciting input. And I hope the good news is, people see a pretty serious debate about all these issues and a pretty thorough vetting.
Yeah.
Chris?
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think I'll just speak from my perspective. What this provided me was a lot of information to start to think about what those next steps might be. This is not the idea to then come up with all the vision and plans from this. Mike, you pointed to it, having this day one as a commissioner would have been great, and I think we now have some great information to go off of this. Yeah, I think that's all. I think this is, I also want to say thank you for this work. I have a lot of questions still.
Yes.
Or I will, I assume, have more questions, but I think this is such a great start for us to really start to pinpoint, and as Mike said, we're questioning some of these data points. So it's important to us to just get that right, and it's not about, look, some of this stuff is going to have to be subjective, and we've kind of been elected, quite candidly, to make those decisions. But what I like about this council is how much data and information that we are seeking to make those best decisions. Yes, at some point, we are going to have to decide.
Right.
But it feels to me, just based on this and based on our previous meetings, this council is very interested in getting it right. So whether you agree or don't agree, and we don't always agree, obviously, I think everyone here is striving to get it right. Thank you, Mayor.
Unless anything else is out there, would like a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you all. Good night.